This is an oral history interview with C. Bruce Carrier, 2810 Woodview, Lansing, Michigan, 48911, phone 517-485-5075, on Friday, May 10th, 1991, at the Oldsmobile History Center with Helen Earley of the center. That's your phone number, and then we can go from there.
My name is C. Bruce Carrier. I live at 2810 Woodview in Lansing.
What's your zip code mailing?
48911. Phone number is 485-5075.
Okay. And today is Friday, May 10th?
Friday is May 10th, 1991.
All right. We've talked about our little interview agreement, and I appreciate your signing it. So why don't you start with your career? What decided you to come to Oldsmobile, and then anything you think of, when was that? And we'll follow right along.
Well, I decided to come to Oldsmobile for money, like everybody else, you know.
Okay.
I mean, most everybody. And my father-in-law had worked for Olds, and then I had a real good friend that worked for Olds. And so I went to work at Oldsmobile.
When was that, Bruce?
That was in April 28th or 29th, I forgot which, 1949.
Okay.
And
Now, were you just out of school then? Or?
no, I had just gotten out of service. I got out of service in February of no, not quite. I just I'd been working as an investigator for the State Welfare Commission.
Oh, after you got out of the service?
Yes, yeah, and I went to college, and I went to work there. I didn't finish college. And,
where did you go to college?
Michigan State.
What were you studying there?
I was going to be a social worker, but I really didn't like it. After I got into it, I did not like it. Mm-hmm. So I left one summer and I got a job with the State Welfare Department as an investigator. And they had caseworkers and investigators. The pay was the same, but that was the way it was at that time. And I had the Muskegon and Grand Rapids area. And all I handled at that time was cases of fraud against the state. And I can still remember my boss I had. If the state of Michigan's got a penny coming, you see that they get it. If the recipient's got a penny coming, you see that they get it. And there's no in between. And that always stuck with me. I don't know why, but it did.
It's a good rule.
Yeah. And
so you decided that Olds paid better?
Well, at that time, I think I got $2,400 a year.
With the state?
Yeah. And that was in 1948. And it just wasn't enough. So I quit. I worked just a year for them. And I quit and came to work for Olds.
Hey, where did you put your application in? Where was
the old Building 60, which was located on Townsend Street. The employment office was located off Elm Street.
In what building? Right?
In Building 60 in the basement.
On the south end?
Yeah. No, yes, you're right. You're right, it would be the south end.
Okay, so you entered the building to get to the employment office off Elm?
Yeah, I forgot where you parked your car then, but I remember that there was a tennis court where Building 22 and 23 are now, right in there someplace. There was a tennis court that belonged to the city. Across the street from Building 60 was a park.
That'd be on the east side of town?
Yeah. Okay. And as I say, I can't remember, of course, where I parked at that time. But the first person I contacted at Oldsmobile was a fellow by the name of Fineout.
Don Fineout?
Don Fineout, yeah.
Was he in the personnel?
Yeah, he was he was one of the fellows in personnel, and Tom Shields, if I remember right, was the other fellow.
Okay.
Both real nice people, just real nice people. And so I came, that's what caused me to come to work for Oldsmobile.
That was in
Yeah.
February?
No, it was in April of 1949.
Okay. What, did you apply for any type of position, or?
Well, I originally applied for salary, but they had told me at that time that they had just just had a release of a bunch of salaried people, and they'd have to call them back first, and they were not hiring any. And as I say, there was a friend of mine, I think he was Director of Labor Relations, and
Who was he?
McFarland. What was it, McFarland?
Harold?
Yeah, I think it was Harold McFarland. And he was the one that told me, he said, they're just not doing anything. But he said, I'm sure that he said, if you get in, he said, you'll be able to go do something else. So I find out, fixed me up, got me a job over to Plant 2, which was the old forge plant.
Oh, yes.
And
What were you doing over at Plant 2?
I worked in the bumper bracket department, bending bumper brackets. And I worked for a guy by the name of George Sandburn.
George Sandburn.
Yeah. And
What kind of a guy was he?
he was a nice fella. He was a nice person. He'd yell and holler if things didn't go right. But if you did your job and everything went okay, you didn't hear a peep out of it. You didn't even see him. The only time you saw him was when something went wrong. And usually you better tell him first. But we never had any problems that I know of, as I can recall.
You said bending bumper brackets.
Yeah.
How did you do that?
Well, there was the steel was put in a furnace. If I remember right, it was heated up to about 1,800 degrees.
Was that a roll steel? Or
No,
a sheet steel?
that was just steel bars, small steel bars about. Oh gosh, I can't remember how thick they were offhand.
2 inches thick?
Oh no.
Very thin?
Yeah, I'd say less than a quarter of an inch thick,
Oh.
but I can't remember the exact thickness.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, one was bent one way, and one was bent the other.
You mean one end of the bracket was bent
Yeah.
one way? How long were these bars?
Oh, about 18 inches long. Wait a minute, yeah, about 18 inches, somewhere a little longer, depending on what car they went on.
I see. Was
And
the bracket that long?
yeah, the bracket. Then of course the bracket was attached to the frame, and then the bumper was attached to the bracket. If you went back to the cars at that time, they all had the Olds was known for its big heavy bumpers,
Right.
and those brackets had to be pretty sturdy, and they were.
So then, was the bracket hot when you were
Mhm.
forming it? Or?
Yeah, it was hot. And of course, it was formed by this press, and there was one guy on one side and one guy on the other, and we used to switch off just for change. And
Who was the guy on the other side of you?
a guy by the name of Kenny Pranger, I can't remember the other fella.
How
But,
much did you earn? What did they pay then? Now that was an hourly job.
Yeah, I can't recall. I don't remember.
Okay.
But it was way less than, it was less than $2 an hour.
Did you have to join the union?
Yeah, no, at that time you didn't have to. The union was allowed to come around, at that time was allowed to come around and ask if you wanted to join.
Was that the
Yeah, that was a local 652, and that was not mandatory that you join the union. It wasn't for, I don't know, a couple of years later that it became mandatory. You had to join the union.
Were you still working there then?
Yeah.
Brackets?
Well, I would know at that time I'd been, it was going to be some openings in the electrical department, and for an electrical apprentice, and et cetera. So a guy by the name of Bill Bailey was the general foreman. I know his last name was Bailey. I'm not sure about his first name.
He was your general foreman?
He was the general foreman, yeah.
In the bracket?
Yeah, he was he was over maintenance.
Oh.
And he told me that, he said, you go on over and take the test. And he said, if you can pass it, he says, I'll put you in one of the trades that you might want to go into.
Where did you have to go to take that test?
I think I went over in old building 28. I'm reasonably sure that's where I went at that time.
Do you remember the name of the instructor?
No, there was just one of the fellows came in, and I was all alone when I took the test. And when I got through, they told me they'd let me know. And I went back, and a couple of days later, I went in to see Bill, and he says, well, you're all right. He said, we're going to have an opening for an electrical apprentice. And he said, if you want to try it, he said, we'll put you in there. And I said, fine. Well, in the meantime, Kenny Pranger had been transferred. We got another guy in there. So I just got transferred out of there because they knew I was going to leave. And they decided that, they put me in the yard gang for a while. And I think
What did the yard gang do?
just cleaned up the yard.
Is that still at Plant 2?
Yeah, and we did just about everything, from clean the floors to replace the bricks, the wooden blocks in the floors. And I wasn't there too long. By that time, the Korean War had started. And I was helping on a Saturday, working on one of the furnaces. They were cleaning it. And you didn't turn down Saturday work. That was time and a half. And my wife called me. And she was all in tears. I'd been recalled. And Truman had just extended everybody's service time a year. So that meant I had to go back. But I was into my Truman's year. Used to call it the Truman year.
Oh.
When they added that on to you. And so when I got recalled, I was 3 months into my Truman year. But they recalled me anyway. They didn't care. So I left. I was a little upset, but...
Well, didn't the Olds give you a military leave?
Yeah, they gave me a military leave, and away I went.
And that was about 52.
No, I was in 51. And then when I got down to Norfolk, Virginia, I was put in charge of 6 barracks. That's all I had to do was make sure those barracks that they were clean. And until they got a slot open for me over at the amphibious base. And I stayed there for 3 months.
Is that still in Norfolk?
Yeah. And I had working parties and all. I had my own room. I had everything, but I was sure homesick. And so after that, I figured, I wonder what they're going to do. Well, I either had to re-enlist because I could run small craft and etc. They offered me a job at one of the harbors running a tugboat if I wanted to if I'd stay in the Navy. And I said, no, I want to go home. Well, they were naturally a little upset that they had recalled me and during Truman's year, because that was just, that was expensive. But they said, okay, you either got to re-enlist or we're going to have to send you home. I said, send me home, because I would not re-enlist. And so I came home, went back, and of course my slot had been filled.
There's a maintenance crew at Plant 2.
No, it's in the electrical department as an apprentice. I wasn't in the electrical department, but Bill had no choice.
But you passed the test, so
Yeah, I could pass. I can get that.
no little slot.
Yeah, I get it. If I can find it.
Let's see here. Kind of, these plastic things don't always fit that great, do they?
Yeah, and some people are kind of clumsy.
Oh, that's all right. There we go. Now we got it.
And then so I came back and went in the yard gang again.
Still at Plant 2.
Yeah, still at Plant 2. And in '52, the Plant 3 was going. They were making jet engines over there. And they were hiring a lot of people. They came in droves. And I'd see Fine Out and Tom Shields and other people. Occasionally would come into Plant 2.
Was this 53 then? 54?
In '52.
50, still 52
Yeah.
at the end of that Truman.
Yeah. After I got out of service, I came right back to work for Oldsmobile. Well, after that was going, then one day, somebody said, why didn't I try Plant Security? It was Plant Protection then.
Mm-hmm.
And Homer Purchase was the director, and Floyd Schwab was the captain. So I went over and I talked to Chief Purchase. And I waited a couple of weeks, and I kind of thought, well, maybe I'd kind of like that job.
Where was Chief Purchase office?
His office was in the basement at that time in Building 20.
Okay.
And everything at that time, the thing that struck me at Oldsmobile was one of the strongest. They painted everything a lousy shade of green.
You mean
It was
interior?
everything interior was half green and half white. It was a terrible color. But anyway, when I went I talked to Chief Purchase a couple of times, and finally one day he says, will you call me on Friday and I'll let you know. Little did I know at that time, Bill Wedge was the investigator.
Yes, Bill Wedge.
Yeah. And they used to go out to your house, and they would go talk to your neighbors. They'd ask your neighbors, does he ever borrow anything? If he said yes, does he bring it back? Yes, if he brought it back. They'd check your credit references. They did a background. At that time, they could get your military record if they wanted to, which they did. They could do anything. And I'm sorry, but this was to show that they had somebody that they could trust. And I was impressed with it. Geez, all that background check. And so, and of course I didn't find this out until after I'd went on. And one day Bill Bailey come down and he said, I thought you wanted to go in the electrical department. I was still in the yard gang at that time, and I said, well, yeah. But I said, I did apply for Plant Protection. And he says, well, he said, it won't be long, and he said, I'll have an opening there if you want to go. He said, you'll make a lot more money in the electrical department than you will in Plant Security, because he said, they're pretty fixed. I said, yeah. I said, I think I'll take the Plant Security, Plant Protection. So I did. And although I never went very far, I was never sorry.
So you were hired in Plant Protection
Yeah.
as
Just a patrolman.
patrolman.
And that's where I stayed.
And what did you do, and where did you do it?
Well, at that time, they gave you a week to break in.
Okay. Did somebody go with you?
Oh, yeah. During that whole week, you had somebody with you all the time. Different man every day.
Oh, did you cover all of the plants?
No, at that time, you just covered Plant 1. They figured I knew Plant 2.
Now, this was in 1950.
52.
Okay, still 50.
This was, if I remember right, I went on there in October. Yeah, October of 52.
What were they paying then?
I got $103 on the first, and $115 and some cents on the 15th.
Now that you were on salary.
Yeah.
Then.
And naturally, even then, that was not a lot of money, but it was enough to get by on. And I was working part-time in the Grand Lakes Police Department at the time, so I wasn't, you know, and I wasn't hurting. Most of the guys in plant protection then had part-time jobs.
Nice.
Some painted, some did, one of the fellows did aluminum windows, and several of them built houses. Everybody, almost all of them had part-time jobs of some sort or another, or their wives worked.
Well, did you have a choice of times of work?
Oh, no, then you worked 7 weeks afternoons, 7 weeks midnights, and 8 weeks days.
Okay, now afternoon shift, you go in at what time?
3:36. You got 4/10 of an hour every day, overtime, and that was paid, of course, on the 15th of the month at that time. And you, that was your clothes change time. You changed your clothes, stood roll call, and the sergeant would check your shoes. You had to wear a hat, even in the middle of the summer.
Did the factory furnish your shoes?
Oh yeah, no, they didn't furnish your shoes or socks or underwear, but they furnished all the rest of your clothes,
including the hat.
Including the hat. They even paid for the cleaning, and you had a space you threw your cleaning and your shirts and etc. But at that time, even in the summertime, for years and years, in the summertime, you still wore a long sleeve shirt, buttoned, never rolled up. That was forbidden. A tie. And you had your hat placed on your head, and it was not at a Johnny angle. You didn't do it.
You had a strict dress code.
Oh yeah, very strict. And you got 2 hours a month. At that time, the man was a Sergeant Shaw. You got 2 hours a month fire training. You got 2 hours a month first aid training. And you got this every single month. Never failed. I can't remember the name of the building right now.
Still at the main
It's
plant?
still at the main plant. It's right across from Building 20. It's right underneath the water tower. Right now, as far as I don't know what it houses. I think it just houses material from the Plant Security Department that's either no longer used or whatever.
How many of you would be in one of those training sessions at that time?
The whole shift.
Okay, how many would be on them? Say you're on the afternoon shift.
There would be 18 men.
18 men, and you would come in at 3:36?
If you were on afternoons, you came 18 men. That was about average. I think it took the same amount of men to run that each shift, except the day shift took them a little longer. That's why the 8 weeks. And it.
So you were on this, say, afternoon shift 8 weeks.
No, we were on afternoon shift when they started. 7 weeks afternoon weeks, 7 weeks afternoons, 7 weeks midnights, and 8 weeks days.
Oh, okay.
And
when did the midnight shift start? Midnight?
no, 11:36.
11:36.
And 7:36 for the day shift.
Okay.
So everybody got that 4/10 of an hour. And if your day off, you got your days off staggered during the week. You started out Tuesday, Wednesday, then Wednesday, Thursday, Thursday, Friday, Friday, Saturday, Saturday, Sunday. Then you'd get another Saturday and Sunday. Then you'd get a Saturday, Sunday, and a Monday. Then you'd get a Sunday, a Monday, and a Tuesday. Then you started all over again. And you used to have people, what they call brackets. It'd either be 2 men in a bracket or 3 men in a bracket. And you had those same days off for that whole year. Now, to some people, they didn't like that. So naturally, they left the job. They didn't like to have their days off during the week. But I liked it because I could take my family and go somewhere. And there wouldn't be big crowds around. But the disadvantage of it was everybody else had Saturday and Sunday off, and you had to work. And if your day off fell on a holiday, where the rest of the plant got paid an extra day, if or whatever, you didn't. That was just your day off. You're out of luck. It was years before they changed that. I think it was sometimes. I think it was in the early '60s before they changed it. See, it was, maybe I'm wrong, but it seems that way.
Well, now where did you go for your first aid training?
The same building.
Oh, the same. Okay. You have the same instructor.
Same instructor.
Okay.
He used to take us out where the Delta Township Fire Department is, right in that area. And they had a great big tub out there. They fill it full of oil. And they had a fire truck. Olds had their own fire truck at that time. I don't think they have one they don't have one anymore. They had a fire truck and an ambulance. And you used to have to go out there. And they'd set that oil tank on fire and let it really get blazing. And you had to go and put it out. You put two guys on a hose and you walked up there and you put that out. That's the way they used to do it. I mean, you've got a lot of hands-on experience. And if they had a fire in the plant, it was always listed out where everybody could see what happened, how it happened. This was Duke Shaw's way of doing it. This is what happened. Now, they didn't criticize you, but he would say, this is how it happened, and this is what happened. Now, this is the way we should have done it. If there was, criticism, it was not meant for criticism, it was meant to help us do a better job. Nobody's name was ever mentioned. Nobody's name was ever mentioned.
And this was also a written report, so you could study it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, this is what he used to insist upon. In first aid, Shaw had a repertoire of dirty jokes that was absolutely out of this world. And of course, all he had at that time in the class were men. There were no women in. Well, he would get you doing something in first aid training, and he'd tell two or three of these dirty jokes, and then he'd turn around and look at you. How'd you do that? He'd do everything he could to distract you, and he was a real professional at it. I don't know how many times he got me, but it was a good many. Anyway, he was a rough, gruff man, but he had to be, because he taught, when he was teaching first aid or fire, it was, you're messing with somebody's life, so do the best you can. And he did such a good job that when I used to get in the ambulance and have to take a patient to the hospital, somebody pass out with a heart attack, for weeks afterward, I'd wonder, did I do everything I was supposed to do? Did I do everything right? But I wasn't the only one. We all did. Now they don't do that anymore. And I think that's kind of sad, because we offered it. We gave a good service to the employees. We had a real good relationship with the union. And we had a good relationship with management.
Why do you think they discontinued that service?
Money.
What now? Suppose somebody in the plant, as you say, had a heart attack. What happens?
We call the paramedics in.
Oldsmobile paramedics?
No, outside
paramedics.
paramedics. It's mostly the city or Delta Township. And they're good. There's no question about it. They're very good. And at one time, not too many years ago, I'd say about 15 years ago, they paid for any patrolman that wanted to go get his emergency medical technician. It cost them $1,800. They paid him $1,800 if they go do it. It was either $1,800 or $1,400. I forgot which.
So, like, you're a patrolman and you decide you like the additional...
if you want the, yeah, they would pay for it.
The factory would pay.
Come,
and
yeah.
you could go over to...
LCC.
LCC.
They'd give you whatever you had to do to make it work. I mean, you had to go to emergency rooms around the hospital area to do it, but they would do it. I never did because I just didn't want to. At that time, I didn't have to ride in the ambulance anymore, so.
Do you remember of any incidents that you were personally involved in, like, say, medical or illness or injury?
There was one that I never forgot. Never forgot. Howard Teller, he was a sergeant. We got this call down in 52 and picked this guy up. He had a heart attack. Put him in the ambulance, and it was the old Cadillac ambulance, one of the first they had. And we were on it. Teller was driving the ambulance, and I was sitting in the back. I had oxygen on him, and he was still breathing, but we gave him the oxygen. All of a sudden, he quit. And I remember leaning forward and pulling the window open and telling Howard, I said, you better kick this thing in the behind because we got to get there. This guy just quit breathing. Now, at that time, you didn't know anything about that.
Okay, so this man has just stopped breathing.
Yeah. We were on our way to Sparrow. Don't ask me why we were going to Sparrow, but that's where we were going. And we got to Sparrow in one big hurry. Teller got on the radio and called the plant and told them to tell them in the emergency room this guy had just quit breathing. And we got there, and we didn't even back the ambulance up to the door. They were out there at Sparrow, and they got him. They got him inside. So we waited to get our litter back, and I think they call it a gurney. Waited to get it back. We got it back, and the first thing we had to do was you change the sheets right then. Most of the time, you change them before you ever put it back in the ambulance, because you never knew when you was getting another call. So we changed the sheets, put it back in the ambulance, and at that time, that particular assignment, in the morning, you were on the ambulance run and the scales. You had two jobs to do.
What do you mean, scales?
Well, you weighed all the scrap trucks that came in and out. And then in the afternoon, you went down to Pine Street Gate. So you got to switch off a job. I went back to Pine Street Gate at noon, and this did not bother me. This guy, I figured he was dead, and I was sitting there, and it was about 2:30, and here he come walking to the plant. I sat there looking at him, and I was so shocked, I couldn't even say anything. He just looked at me and smiled and walked on in the plant. And I remember calling Teller up, and I said, you know that guy we took to the hospital, and I was stuttering and stammering. And I said, he's still alive. He just came back to work. He's crazy. I said, no, I'm not. No, I said, he did. He said, you're seeing things. I said, no, I'm not, Howard. I said, for God's sakes, go down and check. I said, maybe I better go home. I'll never forget that.
And it was the same?
It was the same guy.
What had happened there?
He wouldn't stay in the hospital. He just got up and walked out.
How did they get him? Was it a heart attack he had?
He had a heart attack. Definitely had a heart attack because he was dead 2 days later. He died 2 days later.
Oh, gracious.
Yeah, and
They're in the plant?
No, he didn't die in the plant, he died at home. But he did die, and it was his heart, and he had a heart attack. He went right back to work. And I remember asking Shaw about it. I said, Jesus, that shocked the hell out of me. And Shaw said, I remember Duke Shaw telling me, he said, was he from the old country? I said, I don't know. He said, I'll find out. And so Shaw found out. Sure enough, he was from Poland. The guy was from Poland. This is why this sticks in my mind so. He said, often you'll find those people that came over from a foreign country. They will not quit work. They just won't do it. He said, no matter how sick they are, they get up and go to work. He said, you'll find a lot of them that way. And I said, holy cow. Now, but I never forgot that.
You remember his name?
No.
Gee, when was this? Maybe 53, 4, or 5? Doesn't really matter, Bruce.
Yeah, it was probably about, yeah, it was around 55. Yeah.
We can get this closer
Well,
to you here, so that won't happen. Let's do it that way. Sure.
yeah, it was around 55.
Hmm.
Then I had one that we took a patient to St. Lawrence. We got out. And, I had an assignment to go to, and I was going to be late. And so I said, hey, can we change these sheets? Because there was other ambulances wanted to come in. And I remember asking the sergeant, can we change these sheets when we get back? Because I said, I got to hurry. And I said, we haven't got a place to park out here so we can do it. He said, okay. So we were on our way back, and we had to go to Plant 3 to pick up a patient. And boy, to Plant 3 we went. And I got in the back, stopped right in the middle of Logan Street. I got in the back end to change the sheets on the way to Plant 3. And we changed it. It was very important that you do that. We got to Plant 3, picked up the patient, took him to St. Lawrence. This time we changed the sheets right there. And I was real late by that time, of course. But there were some bad ones at old. We had some deaths.
Remember any specific incidents that you were involved in personally?
Yeah, there was outside of deaths of heart attacks. The nurses that Oldsmobile hired, and I don't know who was responsible for hiring them, but they sure knew how to pick the right people. They really did.
Do you remember any nurses' names?
Yeah, Marge Reardon was one. I worked with Marge Reardon several times. Not just a few times. But it seemed that every time something happened, she would be there and I'd be there.
Who was the doctor then?
He's a tall guy.
Gunderson?
No.
Steiner?
Steiner was the doctor then. And yeah, there was one guy got his head clipped from a die over at Plant 3.
Well, what do you mean? How did that?
Well, it was a cable, a supporting cable or a safety cable, I forgot which. It was on this die, and this guy was working on it, and it broke. And when it broke, it clipped him right alongside the head, took the top of his ear off, part of his skull away. And when we got there, it was right after it happened, within 3 minutes, 3 or 4 minutes after it happened. Marge was already there.
Now this is at Plant 3.
Yeah. We picked him up, put him on the litter, and he was located in such a place that we took him into first aid first, medical department, which at that time, I don't know whether it's been changed, because I've been over there in several years, but we took him into medical, and Marge was...
Where was that located at Plant 3?
It was on the west side of Plant 3. on the north side of the lobby. And Marge was working on him. She was tying it, working on his head. And I was holding his head. And of course, with a head wound, you bleed like I guess the best word to describe it, like a stuck pig. It's real hard to stop. And she was working on him, and I was holding his head, and she kept asking, she said, "Are you going to get sick?" And I said, "No, I'm not going to get sick." All I could think of was, I wish we could get it over with. But, because I didn't figure the guy would make it. We got him to the hospital, and that was in the early 50s, because we still had that Cadillac ambulance. And we got the guy to the hospital, and he lived. And he was the only one that I ever knew that ever came back and thanked us. He made a special effort to come around and thank us for taking him to the hospital and so on. But he never was right after that. He never was right. He walked with his right side, he walked with a very bad shuffle. And the only thing he could do was a janitor. And of course, that's the job that he ended up with. And he was a real nice fella.
Do you remember his name?
No. You try not to.
Oh, sure.
You try very hard to never remember their names.
Well, Bruce, the Olds, in your opinion, then really tried to help employees.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Jobs.
If an employee had trouble at home, and his wife called in, and he was in a carpool, we'd take him home. I've driven to St. John's, taking an employee home, because his wife called and they had a child emergency. And yeah, I've done that I don't know how many times. And they used to have a big carpool out of Ithaca, and it was one of the guys drove all the way to Ithaca. Yeah, they used to do that. This was a commonplace, acceptable. And any time that they ever had a strike, General Motors, the union strike, whether it was with the Teamsters or UAW, when the Teamsters had a strike, well, everything shut down, and Teamsters would come around and see that there were no trucks coming up to the plant. Now, they couldn't get in the plant. That was forbidden. But they could drive by it. That was perfectly all right, legal. And never once in all my time at General Motors did we ever even have an incident. Not even the smallest one. If you were on duty, and like during a strike, if something was happening, somebody get in the sauce, for example, all you had to do was look at the picket captain, and you turned your eyes and you looked at the guy, and the guy was gone. That's quick. And they soon learned that they lost their $20 a week. Back then it was $20 a week they got paid for being on strike. The union paid them.
Oh, the union out of their fund?
Out of their fund.
But if
we
the
pay
man
them.
was...
The guy got in trouble, he got drunk. He lost that $20. Now, I don't know whether those fellows ever lost it or not. I hope they didn't. But, and then I did some things that I shouldn't have done.
Can't imagine you doing things.
Oh, yeah. Used to be that on Thanksgiving and Christmas, New Year's, before they had the week off between, they would take 2 or 3 of us and put us down in the final assembly areas. Your job was to walk up one aisle and down the other. All day. The 2 shifts. One guy did it one shift, and 2 guys did it the other shift. Keep them from drinking. He used to have quite a drinking problem, and it wasn't really serious. But around New Year's and Christmas and Thanksgiving, everybody gets a little bit holiday spirit, and of course the spirits come out in the process. But
How could they get the liquor in?
Oh man, they used to tape the bottles to the inside of their legs. Now you can't check anybody. You can't walk up and frisk them. Even then you couldn't do that unless you had a good reason. And you better be real careful. Don't touch anybody's clothes or don't touch the person unless you'd had to do to defend yourself. Then you better not hit them. Whatever you do, you didn't hit them. You could restrain them, but you couldn't hit them. That was a lot stricter then. You have no idea how strict they were. They were very definite about it.
Did you carry a gun?
No. We didn't have to.
Did you carry any
Didn't need to.
of defending yourself?
No, we didn't need to. Honestly, we didn't need to. All you had to use is your common sense. I got in trouble one time. I walked up on these two guys, and there was quite a gang around them. And they were having a fight. So I got it quieted down, and I said, now, if you guys think you can get along and straighten your day out without starting this over again, I'll walk off and leave you. And nobody will know about this. If you can't, you're in trouble, because they'll fire both of you. They will fire both of you, and they did that then. Well, they said they could. I thought they could, but they didn't. And of course, I got called in the office about it. Because when it happened, I admitted it. I told them, yeah, I did it. Why didn't you turn them in? I said, well, I didn't want them to lose their jobs. But it turned out they lost their jobs anyway. But that right then I learned, well, that's not for you to decide. That's for somebody else to decide. And
well, what would you do now? Like here, it's a Christmas weekend, and you're walking up and down the lines in that'd be the assembly plant.
yeah.
You saw somebody obviously under the weather.
Well,
Or even
if it hadn't gone too far, you stopped it.
how would you stop it?
Well, if you could catch him with a bottle, you'd walk over to him and say, "It's a pretty good bottle you got there. It might be half full or 3/4 full or 1/4 full, whatever." You took him over to a drain, pour it down the drain, the whole bottle. And of course that diffused it right then, because by that time the guy's dislike for you, for what you had to do, was, oh, what is he going to do to me? Now, the punishment of pouring that bottle down the drain. Now, we were not supposed to do this. He was supposed to be taken to the foreman's office, the whiskey confiscated, turned in.
And a record.
And a record made, and a reprimand was given to him, and he was either taken home by the company, or he was taken to the gate and told to go. He had to leave. And usually they got 30 days for that.
Without pay.
Without pay. Without pay. And
Now this is in the 50s.
this is in the 50s, yeah. And so you didn't really want to be responsible for that.
Well, suppose somebody was really way out.
If there,
Sheets to the wind.
if there were really 3 sheets to the wind, and it was,
They didn't have any liquor on them that you could tell.
oh, well, they left that up to your judgment. And I've been in court because of that judgment. They would say that afterwards they weren't drunk, and I'd say, well, in my experience, in my job, I would say yes, they were under the influence of alcohol. And usually, they were the 2 cases that I were involved in, the court cases. They were both found guilty. But if you were alone with that person, there wasn't too many people around, in other words, and you could get away with it, you'd get the committee man. As I say, this was illegal as all get out. You'd get the committee man, you'd tell him, come here. You'd get a hold of his family, and you have him come to Elm Street Gate, because for some reason, even though Elm Street Gate was right close to Building 60, Nobody ever bothered with it. They had a door out in the back they called 28 doors, which was another exit, an entranceway. And we used to take them out that way because nobody ever went down there, and nobody ever looked. So we would take that person. If we had to, we'd put him in a gon, put him on a fork truck. The guy would lift the fork truck up so nobody could see it. He'd drive out the plant, and they'd take him down to 28 doors. And a couple guys would get him out. His wife would be there, load him in the car, and he'd be gone, and nobody was the wiser. Well, we were getting one time. It was so bad, and we were getting so many of them. And I went down the L Street gate, and I stood there, and there was nothing I could do because the lineup of cars. I had 4 or 5 cars down there already. I thought, this is getting out of hand.
What do you mean lineup of cars?
Waiting to bring somebody out that had too much to drink.
Now these would be company cars?
No, they weren't company cars. They were family cars coming after their family members. So I thought, well, I got to get rid of those cars. Geez, somebody's going to see that. Warren Ralston was on the gate. And we stood there talking about what we were going to do. And Warren Ralston looked at me and he says, well, I guess we're going to have to take him out Elm Street Gate. I said, right under Building 60's nose? Geez, I said, do you think we can get away with that? He said, well, we're sure going to try. So went down, got the cars, got them up there, got them up to the door. Got him into Building 28. Got a couple guys, walked them out as best you could. A couple of them they carried out. You had 2 of them right in a row they were carrying out. I can't remember the guy that was the head of the bumper plating. He was the superintendent of bumper plating. Little short guy. His name was Scotty. Everybody called him Scotty.
Bob Scott.
Bob Scott, yeah. Who should drive up with Bob Scott? He sat there, and I thought the man would split. He started to laugh. And he says, you know what you're doing? I says, yeah. He says, you're putting yourself on the line, you know that? And I says, yeah. He says, how many you got? I said, I don't know. I says, they just keep coming.
Now this was a holiday weekend?
Yeah, this wasn't a holiday. It was just before the weekend. This is the last day they worked.
Oh, okay.
So we got them all out. And ever after that, every time I'd see Scott, he used to laugh. He'd look at me and he'd laugh like, he said, every time I see you, he'd think of that. It was funny. We shouldn't have done it, but if I had it all to do over again, I'd do the same thing. But we did a lot of those things we weren't supposed to do, just to keep the peace. And it worked.
And the union would work with you?
Oh yeah, you'd get the committee man, and like any incidents, you know, when people work 7 days a week, and they're working 12, 14 hours a day, it isn't very long and they get short-tempered. It's just natural. And you got to make allowances for that. I'm sorry, but you do have to. They're in there to work, and if they don't work, nobody's going to get paid. I mean, if the people that are there doing the work, if you can't support them and help them, when, you know, because everybody stumbles once in a while, if you can't support them and help them, they aren't going to make it. But I like my job. I liked what I was doing. I liked where I was at. Yeah, I never went any farther. I'm glad I didn't. I didn't want to. I did for a while, like everybody else, but then again, after a while, what did I have to prove? I didn't have to prove anything.
Who were some of the other plant patrolmen that you worked with?
Lee Nesson, Orrin Ralston,
Gordon Ralston?
Orrin,
Warren Ralston.
Lee Hadley.
Now, he became lieutenant, didn't he?
No.
Oh,
No.
didn't we have a Lieutenant Hadley?
Yeah, we had a Lieutenant Hadley, but that was long after.
Oh, I see. Sam McFarland?
Sam McFarland was there. Yeah, Sam, I felt kind of bad. We had, there was a lot of bitterness a lot of bitterness in our department because things that happened before I got in the department, even before purchase was achieved, that made it unsatisfactory, and they joined the union. But they joined it during the time that he became chief.
Oh, I see.
But this was a thing from in the past.
What would be some of those things?
I don't know. Most of the guys at that time were see, I came in 52.
Mm-hmm.
The union had been in effect for probably 4 or 5 years before that.
Even though you were salaried people,
Yeah.
you were still union?
Yeah, we were the only salary group in General Motors. It was a union.
I see.
And I made it. I mean, I made the statement several times that I couldn't see why we had to have a union. Well, if you knew what went on in the past, you wouldn't feel that way.
But you never found out what had gone on.
The only thing that I ever found out was, and again, I couldn't verify this. This was just something that I was told. One day during the week when it was real slow, during the changeover time, they made the guys wash windows. And I guess that was one of the things that triggered it, made them mad.
Oh, yeah.
And when they all got mad. Well, many years later, the desk people were exempt from the union. And of course, the sergeants and above were all exempt. And one day I was over to Plant 2. I don't know what I was over there for, but when I came back, I came out the gate. One of the guys was there. He wasn't working, he was just in the plant. He was just there. He came out and he said, "Are you going over to Plant 1? I said, "Yeah." He had me an envelope. He says, "Give this to the guy on the desk." I said, "Okay." That's another thing you never did. Whatever you were given, you didn't look into it, see what it was.
No.
That's just, those things were forbidden. That was a private matter between whoever, whatever. And so I took it over and gave it to the desk man. Little did I know that there were the cards for the desk people to join the union. I didn't find that out till later. And so I got asked, the guy, did I know anything about it? And I said, no, I didn't know anything about it. Do now. Didn't then. And so they joined the union. That was just about the time that Husby came in as chief. But there again, I felt the company kind of failed them. I really felt the company failed them because there were so many rumors floating around of what this guy was going to do. Now, Husby, yeah. And there were some people from the police department were feeding stories, and they decided that this was not going to work. Well, Belts was the general manager, and I guess he was the guy that brought Husby in. But he was the first outsider, and they didn't like it. They did not like it.
Why would they bring an outsider in?
I don't know why they did. It was, we had always been taught, not taught, it was always a feeling at Oldsmobile that you were, it wasn't just plant protection or the hourly worker, the salaried worker. You always had a feeling you belonged there. You were part of something. And I had a shirt-tail relation that was a research engineer for Ford Motor Company. And their plant security people operated entirely different than we did. Now, I don't know about other General Motors plants because I've never been to one. But they looked down at everybody.
You mean
They had a different attitude. I can't explain it. There was just
higher level than the other people.
well, they thought they were better than anybody else. Where at Oldsmobile, you didn't feel that way. For example, Bob Rollis would see you walking down the street. Actually, what Oldsmobile was a city within a city. And Bob Rollis would see you walking down the street, and he'd pull over. Now this was the manufacturing manager, and he didn't call you by, would you like a ride? 9 times out of 10, he'd call you by your first name. He'd say, "Hi, Bruce, where are you going?" "I'm going back to the office." "Come on." And he'd go out of his way and take you to the office. Now, of course, Wolfen wouldn't do that. And if you can't say something nice about somebody, you don't say nothing. So, but anyway, Bob Rollis and people like that. Scotty was another one. Ginter was another one. Sure, they got sore at people. And, yeah, I'm sure Purchase got sore at me more than once. And I'm sure Schwab did too. But you never felt like you were in danger. You always felt like you belonged.
Like a family.
Yeah. You felt like you know, this was part of you. It was a good part. Yeah, you had your good days and bad days like anybody else, but I always felt it. I always felt very comfortable. Whatever decision I made when I was out in the plant, never was I questioned. Never.
Your judgment was...
That was it. But you didn't make a bum judgment. You didn't. You just had this, whether it was hourly or salary or whoever it was, you got cooperation out there. If you had a fire out there, they had a fire brigade at that time. They had a badge that said fire brigade on it. And then if you had a salary on it that said administration on this little gold, it was imposed on the fire brigade badge. And all the maintenance people were on the fire brigade. In fact, if you don't have one of those badges, I think I got one at home.
Well, that would be awfully nice, Bruce.
I'll have to look. I know I got one around somewhere.
That would be a very nice artifact.
And if you had a fire, people would drop whatever they were doing. They actually drop whatever the maintenance people, and they would rush to that fire to help put it out. And by the time you got there, a good many times, by the time you got there, the fire was already out. Because these people would always put the fire out. They'd laugh at you. "Hey, you're getting a little slow, carrier." And you'd look around. Huh? But it was a good feeling. It was a good feeling. 50s, the 60s, and the
Well, we were talking about these fire brigade people. Bruce, do you remember any big fires? Did the Olds have any real big fires or unusual situations dealing with fire that you recall or were involved in?
Believe it or not, Nick Kiefer was the fire marshal at that time. Of course, you got to remember, I'm speaking of the good years. And he was a very personable type of a man, very personable. And he had everything very well under control. Even today, if you walked out in the plant, you see fire extinguishers all over the place. Lots of fire extinguishers. Now, I suppose that'll change. But as a patrolman, you had to know the sprinkler systems in the building. All of them. You carried a book, because it was impossible for one person, to remember that whole 100 and some acres of sprinkler systems. Impossible.
Now, was that 100 acres just at Plant 1?
Yeah, I think it was either 109 acres or 120 acres. Maybe it was more than that, but it seems to me that at that time that's about what it was. And and if I remember right, that only extended up to Logan Street at Building 68. Now, when they went on beyond that, of course, it was more. But there was a forge plant there and a gas station on the corner of Logan and Holes Avenue. And across the street was a couple with some old shacks for houses. And of course, I won't tell you what was in them. But anyway, any fire that they ever had was always small. The reason that they were always small fires, that Nick Kiefer had such good control over things, the fire never got a chance. A fire never got a chance because people go in there and put that fire out.
Well, what would cause the fire to start?
Well, you could have electrical fire, those bus boxes. You got to remember that most of this 100 and some acres was under a roof. And for example, in 68, 69, they had that bad snowstorm. That's the most recent. They had part of the roof collapse in Building 32 because of the weight of the snow. Now, I don't remember when that building was put up, but it was sometime in the 1920s. It's the 32 and 75 and 26 and 20, and are all real old buildings. But the roof just collapsed. The floor is in the second floor of Building 32 was wood, still wood. And well, it's just that way because of its age. Instead of having cement supports inside the building, they were wooden supports, big heavy wooden supports. And then on the outside of them was steel. When this roof collapsed, within minutes, they had people in there cleaning it up. That was, that's when things were different. You didn't have to call anybody. Our own guys went down there, our own people went down there and got shovels to help clear away things so that they could get the crews in there to do the repair work. You didn't think about it.
Whose job it might be.
Yeah. You just went in there because production meant paychecks. Yeah, you can find a lot of people that got a lot of complaints about Oldsmobile, but if you stop and realize for a little while, no, you better look the other way. Oldsmobile was a good place to work, a fun place to work. You enjoyed going to work, and you did a good job. You did a good job.
Did Purchase retire because of it was time for him to retire?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then
See, they had a mandatory at that time. They had a mandatory 65.
okay.
I think he went out a little before that because of health, but not much.
And then Darrell Husby came in.
And Darrell Husby came in. He was the first outsider. Truthfully, he was never accepted. Never.
Who was the fire marshal
What?
after
After Nick Kiefer left, Howard Teller was there, and he was not the fire marshal. He was a lieutenant by that time, and he was the instructor and etc. He did all. He had Duke Shaw's job. Duke Shaw had retired, and
Duke Shaw was an instructor.
yeah, he was a lieutenant, and then of course he retired, and then Howard Teller took over, and then Dale Hoffman took over. Dale Hoffman was was made fire marshal, and he's still a fire marshal.
What kind of a fire marshal is Dale?
Real tough. Real tough. I never had any problems with him. But if it wasn't up to code, what he felt was the code, it wasn't put in, or he'd make them tear it out and do it right.
Now, what would they be tearing out?
Well, if for example, the lighting system in Building 37, they had put that in, and at that time he was not happy with it. But he let it go. And of course they had a fire in there. It cost him $350,000. Well, he did not like that. He's the type of person that he wants everything under control, to a point that it makes you feel that it's a little ridiculous. But he knows what he's doing. He does know what he's doing. And I can remember him saying that that's not going to happen again. And after that, he was a lot tougher after that.
Tighten up everything.
Yeah, he tightened up everything after that. But it wasn't the contractor's fault. It was the supplier's fault. And they went back and made the supplier pay for the whole thing.
The supplier of the
electrical lighting that put in there. And I think that probably Dale had a great deal to do with that, because he would tell, he made no bones about it. He made no bones about it. He said, if it's not right, it's not going to be put in. And I remember that incident. And whether, of course, I wasn't privy to that information, but I assume that he had a great deal of clout in making that company pay it what it cost to do the repair work.
It's their fault.
Yeah. And he's been a good fire marshal. And yeah, they've had some good people, lots of good people.
Now Husby is retired.
Husby's retired and gone.
Who's the
Rick DeKett.
Oh, did you know him?
Not very well. I was out to Plant 5 when he came in.
When
And
did you leave Plant 1?
I left Plant 1 in about 1982. And the reason I left Plant 1 was it was getting too hectic for me. It was really,
Why do you say that, Bruce?
well, things were starting to change. You know, things started to change in the 70s. And,
Oh,
well, you didn't feel comfortable anymore. You had a different breed of cats in there.
you mean on the patrolman?
No, not just the patrolman, but all over. You had a different class of people. I'm sorry to say that word class, but that's the only way I could think of. They were smoking pot. You couldn't do anything about it. Nobody wanted to. Drugs were becoming quite prevalent. Nobody wanted to. I can remember you'd be fired for that. But their reasoning was, well, we've hired them. We'll get a drug rehabilitation program going for them. We'll get alcohol abuse program going for them. I used to think, well, they're not in the business of holding somebody's hand.
Well, Oldsmobile did have this drug and alcohol abuse program. How successful do you feel that was?
I think it was a joke. I still think it's a joke. These people are 21 years old. Most of them are well over 21 years old. Now, they know what they're doing, and you are responsible for what you do. I was taught that when I was a kid. You were taught that when you were a child. And what did you do with it? You became a responsible person. But even higher ups, they began to get a different bunch of people coming in as supervisors, as leaders. And they were not, as I say, I want you to understand, this is my opinion. They were not as good as the ones that had been there before. The ones who had been there before were true. They were hard-nosed. They came out of the Depression. But they were fair. Sure, there was things went wrong. But most of the time, if you went far enough and long enough, somebody would come along and correct it. They would come along and correct it. Maybe you couldn't get it done down here, but you could get it done up here, if it was wrong. But as the 70s came in, that began to change. You couldn't get anything done. The picture began to change. The leadership quality wasn't there. You didn't feel the support there. The strength. The guys would come out and their wives would be there to pick them up at midnight.
Now these are shift
This
people
is
working on
shift
the
people
line.
coming out for. This is just an example. So the guy would be out there in the cold in the middle of winter. So you go out and you'd say, you'd be all alone in the gate yourself. Go on over to the turnstile if you want to and wait. Some of these guys would be over there and they'd urinate in the turnstile, in the gatehouse. Well, of course, you weren't there. But why did they do that? You let them go in where it was warm. This is the quality they were getting. This is the type of people they were getting. I walked out in the plant one time and there was a guy standing in the corner going to the bathroom. I said, what the? I said, can't you walk down 2 bays to the bathroom? I didn't feel like it. I remember that. I took him to the office. He's back to work the next day. This is a change in things. You are responsible.
What about bringing women in on the as a patrolman?
Well, I was opposed to that. I really felt at the time that this was a difficult. This was a difficult job at times, and you could pretty well, people, when they began to hire a lot of blacks, for example, you had very little trouble with a black man or a Mexican man or a Mexican woman. Never any trouble with Orientals either. Of course, they didn't have very many. But a black woman, she'd tear you up. She would just do everything she could. They had the foulest mouths anybody I'd ever seen. And that's where I began to dislike black people. And when they brought the women in, that was my first thought. This is not going to work.
Were you there when Ingrid Kubelis
Yeah.
came in? How'd that work out?
Well, I suppose that by now she's probably pretty successful, but she just wasn't ready for this type of work. Mentally, she wasn't ready. She was a nice person, but she just wasn't ready for this kind of... Life was still a joke to her.
Right.
She wasn't ready to really step up. She was stepping out in the real world. And she just wasn't mentally ready for that. I never worked with her, but that was my observation from watching her.
She wasn't there too
No, no.
She was the first woman. wasn't
She was the first
there
woman.
on the
Yeah.
Security force. Okay.
Renee, her name is Barr now. I don't know what her name is. She was one of the early ones.
Lene Barr.
Renee, R-E-N-E.
Okay.
And she turned out to be excellent. Very good.
She was white.
Yeah, she was white. You know, she was very good on the ball. Very much on the ball. In fact, if you had trouble, I was out in the parking lot one time at night, and the guy I was with, we used to make 2 guys ride in the car at all times, and we were patrolling the parking lot. And they had a bunch of people up in the parking lot was having a party. They were not employees of General Motors. And we went up there to get them out of there, and they were throwing beer bottles all over. So we went up there, and
Now, this is you and Renee?
no,
Oh.
and another fella. And I got out of the car. I was driving. I got out of the car, walked over to them and said, "Hey, fellas, you guys..." And there was a bunch of women and guys there. told them that they'd have to take their party somewhere else. This was private property. And it wasn't allowed here. And please, would you just take your party elsewhere? I knew I was going to have to call in and get a crew to come up and clean that glass up. They started to give me a bad time. And I saw them. You know, they got right in a circle around me. And I said, hey, you guys can do whatever you want. But the more you do, the more they're going to come down on you. They will come down on you. So make up your mind. Whatever you do to me, you'll probably get away with it. But you won't get away with it for long. And one of the women says, hey, if my husband finds out that I'm out here, I won't be able to get out at all anymore. I thought, lady, you just saved my life. That's what I thought, really. And so I got that quieted down. I turned around, my partner was gone.
Were you taking the car and left?
No, he just took off and ran.
Oh.
And frankly, I hated that guy ever since.
Oh, I should say.
Well, when we'd call for help. And
You had the shortwave radio
yeah.
to do that.
Oh yeah, we had radios in the car. We didn't carry radios at that time, but we had a radio in the car. But that guy was gone. And I really didn't think he would go. I didn't think he'd run. But he did. Of course, when the sergeant got there, he wanted to know where he was. I said, I haven't any idea. So when he got back, he told the sergeant he went to the bathroom. I never told the sergeant any different because that wasn't my place to tell him. If he wasn't man enough to admit it, that was his problem, not mine. But I sure wasn't going to trust him anymore. But Renee was the type of a girl that you didn't feel that way, and you knew that wasn't going to happen. If you had something go down, she'd be there, and she'd be right alongside you. There would be no question about it. There were several girls like that. But like any place else, they have a talent for getting rid of the ones that won't, until this affirmative action came in. And that as far as I'm concerned, that was the thing that destroyed it. That caused more problems in General Motors. More dislike, more internal problems than what it was worth. I lost 3 promotions because of they had to put blacks in, and I didn't like that. I didn't mind losing 1. 2 was a little bit tough to swallow. The 3rd one, I said, oh, that's it. And I never bothered with them after that. I told them flat out, I said, I don't care. I don't want any part of it. I'm done with you people. I didn't like what they were putting in there. I felt that most of my supervisors that I had were not qualified. Very poor in comparison to what we'd had before.
Now, a direct supervisor, would he be a lieutenant?
He'd be a sergeant.
Sergeant you'd report to, who reported to a lieutenant?
Yeah.
Then the captain?
And then, well, they done away with the captain finally.
I see.
And then they done away with the lieutenants. Okay, when I first came in the department, they had a chief, a captain, and 14 sergeants, 100 and some patrolmen. You had a sergeant on each shift. I think there's 120 patrolmen, maybe a few more. And as time went on, when this thing finally began to really change, which was in the last 7 years, they dropped the chief, made him a director, and made 3 chiefs, got rid of the captain and the lieutenants, and I think they probably got about 18 sergeants. Now, where in the canopy of heaven do you ever say that would save money?
How many total of security people do you
Now,
Mhm.
in our department,
Yeah. Counting everybody.
Everybody. At Oldsmobile, I'd say 60.
When you came in 52, you said there were about 100 and...
When I came in at 52, there was just about 100. Maybe a few more.
Okay.
Maybe just a few less. But it was about the all-round figure. It took 18 men a shift. And you had 3 shifts. And you had men on days off. So it was right around the neighborhood of 100.
So these 50, 60 people now take care of all of the plants.
That's including the office people. When I said over 100 people, that was just patrolmen.
Oh, so that didn't count desk people or officers.
Mm-mm. Now they got about 60 people in the whole department. You see people, television, they see people walking out with stuff that they... You had theft, and you had problems, you had personnel problems, which, that was something. You remember Red Cherry?
Mm-hmm.
One time I had to go out with Red Cherry because a guy was off on a back injury, and I had to witness this. He was out in a tractor, plowing a field with a back injury.
So bad he couldn't come to work.
And he's so bad he couldn't come to work, but he was drawing compensation for it. And of course, not very long after that stopped. But that was just something that he did. He didn't do this by himself, of course. This was part of his job classification. But I went along as a witness. I've done that several times, lots of times.
What kinds of little trips would you go on to act as a witness, Bruce?
Just like that.
Mostly injury type or compensation type?
Yeah. They didn't pick just, they picked practically anybody in the department would do this. They didn't do it a lot, of course, but they did do it.
Someone they would have occasion or reason
Yeah.
to suspect.
Yeah, I remember one guy that was off on sick leave, and he seemed to get a lot of sick leave. And there were medical people, doctors out there that would sign a sick leave for any reason at all. You could get it. And of course, General Motors, they would honor it. I went out one time with, I forgot who the guy's name was that I went with. Went out there, and this guy had a well drilling machine. And he was drilling a well out at a guy's house. So he was drawing money from General Motors. He was making money drilling a well. He was sitting there drinking a bottle of beer. His well-rigged outfit was running to beat the band. I'll never forget it. I walked out and said, geez, oh, Pete. And I worked part-time. I worked part-time on another job. As I said, most of us did. And then, of course, slowly our pay began to get a little bit better. Now it's falling behind again. But some of that, it'll turn around, I hope. I'd like to see it turn around. I think some people in General Motors have lost a picture of General Motors. I really do. It's not a fun place to work anymore. Very difficult to get a decision today. You cannot get a decision today.
Why do you think that is?
I'm afraid to. I've never seen such backstabbing in my life. Never. You didn't have it. You had some of it, yes. You always do. But there wasn't the deep-seatedness. Like if you didn't like me and I didn't like you, and I said something bad about you, maybe it'd go to 2 or 3 people and that'd be all. That was the old days. But it was not widespread like it is now. Everybody does it. At least that's the way it appears to me. As I say, at least these things are my opinion of the way it is today. They're not trying. They can improve the quality of the product anytime they want to. Anytime. The quality of the product, when Oldsmobile put out a car on that final assembly line, when Minnow and Slackton and a lot of others were there, that was quality coming off that line. It's a good car. You messed up on that line just so many times. you're gone.
And you were still unionized, so the union would work with you, wouldn't they?
Well, I'm talking about the hourly worker.
Yes, but that's what I mean.
Yeah, the union would get with a guy and say, what's your problem? And of course the guy would have, maybe he didn't like his foreman, maybe it was a personality clash. They transferred him someplace, they gave him every chance. I mean, look, General Motors at that time was not hard-nosed. But they tried to be fair. I can honestly say that they gave people chances that I would never give them. But they always treated most of the people that I'd say 99% of the people that I ever seen that had a problem, they treated them more than fair. There were some incidents that I didn't really think they got a fair shake, but that's the way it happened. And of course, it all comes down to, we were wearing a blue suit, and it's been tradition since time began. Nobody likes people in blue suits with badges on their chest. And if they have a problem and they have to call it, when they reduce themselves to realize that, hey, I can't do this, I can't handle this, they feel like they've lost something, so they got to call somebody in there that can solve it. They think you can come in there and take care of that problem like that and walk out. You don't even know what the problem is when you walk in there. So you would go in there and quiet things down till you could sort it out. We all did this. Every guy out there did it. He sorted it out. Problem out in the plant. He sorted it out. He kept it quiet and he kept things rolling.
You remember any specific incidents, Bruce?
Well, the fight was one that I just referred to.
Yes.
See, I was wrong in doing what I did, but it was going to keep them working. It was going to keep things quiet, keep the peace. That was what I was after. When they got a lot of women in the plant, you had more problems.
Why was that?
Well, he and she's always going on since time began. You're never going to change it.
Oh, yes.
And guys would get mixed up with somebody else's wife would get mixed up with somebody else's husband. You'd have, well, at the old Pine Street gate, remember when Sal's was there?
Oh, yes.
They had a couple of battles right there between husbands and wives and wives and wives. And here you were there. And you couldn't step across those railroad tracks. That was city property there. Sal's was city property. All you could do was step back in the gatehouse, call for the city. You couldn't do anything to those people because they're on city property.
What would the city do?
They'd come down, separate them, quiet them down. Yeah, they had some real Donnybrook. Division Street Gate, Elm Street Gate. After building Building 60 was tore out, one guy ran right into another guy's camper after his wife. Oh yeah, they had some real Lulus. This is when things would be, were on the edge of starting to deteriorate for me. And then as time went on, I got sick of it. I didn't like it. The pot was more than what I could stomach. I couldn't really believe that they would be quite so lackadaisical about it. I really didn't think so.
What would be the feeling of the union? Did you get a fix on that? When they're members of the assembly line union saw new people were on dope?
Well, if they had their 90 days in, there was not much you could do.
Really?
If they had their 90 days in, they went into the drug rehab program. And of course, they got all kinds of. Look, they had some good people in that dedicated people in that drug rehabilitation program from the medical department, and they tried. But I always felt that you're 21 years old, it's just not right. You're responsible. That's it. Out the door you go. But General Motors didn't feel that way. they wanted to do something, they felt that they had to do it. So they did it their way. But the dope always bothered me. People stopped buying the cars. I was told, and I don't even remember who told me, it was somebody in I think it was in public relations. I don't know whether you ever heard the phrase or not, but, excuse me, every time they got some bad publicity, it cost them 20,000 cars. It cost General Motors 20,000 cars. I never knew whether that was true or not. But, well, I'd heard it I don't know how many times. And I felt that it did make some sense. It's bound to cause a problem. And when you get a lot of people involved, you're always going to have problems. There's just no way out of it. But when the marijuana came along, that was the first thing that came along. It wasn't, when my kids were in high school, it was just starting in the schools. And I told them, I used to tell my kids, if you get yourself thrown in jail, you're going to know how you got there. And you're going to know how you got out. Because I'm not going to come get you. Now plan on it. I will not come and get you. And so they all knew it. In fact, my son told his son and his daughter that. That's what my dad told me, and that's what I'm telling you. Of course, I've been lucky. None of them have ever been in jail. But dope was just, I think it's a lot more prevalent in the corporation than what some people in the corporation realize. I still do.
Do we still have our drug abuse program going?
I don't know. I don't know.
When you left Plant 1, did you ask to go over to Plant 5?
Yeah.
Okay. What year was that?
About 82, 83, right in there.
Mm-hmm. What did you do at Plant 5?
Well, basically, we all do the same thing. You worked in the plant, you walked around the plant, and...
did you have to make a report on anything unusual? Or
oh, yeah. You had to make a report out every single day.
Every day?
Every day that you worked, you made a report out of what you did that day.
And then when there was an area there to note anything unusual?
There was an area on the back, it was right on the back, irregularities. Okay. Like, for example, they used to have a phrase, and I've forgotten what it was. We were not a judge, and we were not a jury. All we did was report. And that's all we had to do. We reported what happened, what time it happened, and what the incident was all about. Whether it was an accident report in the parking lot with a vehicle, or if it was a problem in the plant.
Did you have to name names? If you
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, you always had to name names. The only thing that you didn't have to name is they didn't ask you to. You didn't have to name the name of an informant. Now, they used to call them informant, and which was a glorified word for what the old word of stool pigeon used to be. And then as somebody came along that was much more educated, they became the complainant, which I thought was a joke. But some of these people would tell you things out of concern for their jobs, for the corporation. Now, they were not stool pigeons. How could you call somebody, because that's what it is to me. I still go back to the old way. They still were stool pigeons. You know, if you complain about this guy because he doesn't do something, that's a stupid. And I don't like those people. But you have to deal with them. But if somebody comes up and talks to you about a job concern where something isn't going right, you can probably, well, you can maybe go somewhere and find out how you can correct it. And that makes you feel good. The guy feels good. For example, one of the things that I said before that I just happened to remember. You'd find a guy sleeping somewhere when he wasn't supposed to be sleeping. He's supposed to be working. Well, you'd wake him up, take his name and clock number. Now, this was the old days. This is different from now. He'd go to his foreman and you'd say, hey, Tom, we got a problem here. So-and-so is out there sleeping. Now, after you'd been around here a while, you didn't even go wake the guy up. Because you knew who his foreman was. So you'd go to his foreman, he's out there sleeping. What do you want to do? You want me to go get him? Bruce, listen. He's got family troubles at home. He's got to go into a divorce, and it's a real nasty divorce. And his kids are giving him a real bad time. I'll go out and get him because I know he's not getting any rest at home. And he was on his break when he went out there. And he said, probably she went out there and woke him up a long time ago, but he said, I just forgot about it. He walked off and left it. You were still in the old-fashioned SOB because you were the guy in the blue suit. He's not going to like you. But he's never going to know what you did because that foreman isn't going to tell him. That foreman's not going to tell him. But the foreman's always going to be a good guy because he talked you out of it. But that's the way, that was the thing. It was a little thing you did.
But it was a big thing in a way.
Well, yeah, for him. But, you know, those things kept things quieted down. It gave you a good relationship with that foreman. And okay, when the foreman had a good feeling about you, because you didn't cause him to have to discipline this guy, and then he didn't have to take it up to his boss. You kept things going. That's why I say General Motors, Oldsmobile was more family oriented. One took care of the other. Even if you were bad, you still took care of people. He still did it. And that began to change. That changed.
That was one of your missions, part of the responsibilities of your job, wasn't it?
Yeah.
To help things run smoothly, to...
You did. You did. And of course, as time went on, that changed.
Do you remember getting involved in any incidents with the union, like when we were on strike after the war? Well, of course, you didn't come in until '49. The strike was over then.
The big strike. Yeah, that was. Yeah.
We've had some little hold-ups here.
They had one that was close to 100 days, wasn't it?
Well, yes, that was the one
Yeah.
in 45, 46, but
yeah.
there was no local strike.
That was
National.
yeah. Didn't they have one? Didn't they have one after that?
Yes, I think
It was
there
quite a while. 3 months.
I didn't remember it that long, but well, what would you do when the plant were?
Okay, all we did was we walked the beach 24 hours a day. They had beach then. But there again, I can't impress on anybody enough. Management cooperated with the union, and the union cooperated with management. They had people. For example, when the strike started, management was sometimes more of a problem than the union was.
Why would you say that?
Well, just a guy named Mix, for example, I was, when one strike started, I was out the plant, used to be Plant 4, which is GM PD now.
Ken Mix?
Yeah. He wanted to lock the door so they couldn't get out. And I said, no, you can't do that. And he said, this is my plan, I'll do it if I want to. I said, no, you won't. I said, "No, you cannot do that." I said, "I'm calling my boss right now." And I said, "You're not going to do it." I said, "You can disconnect the PA system." I said, "That's probably perfectly legal, but I'm also going to tell him you're going to do that, but that's up to you. But you're not going to lock that door. Because if somebody wants to leave, they got a right to leave. You have no right to restrain them." That much I'm not positive of. Well, I called Purchase. Purchase was my boss. And a thing like that, we could go right to the top. There was no question about it. Go right to the top. I told him what was happening, because I was in a confrontation with the plant manager. And which sometimes you had to do. And in fact, I got in a confrontation with Bill Waldron, and he's a nice guy. He really is a nice person.
Well, what did Purchase say?
Purchase says, "No, you don't lock that door." He says, "Whose idea was that?" And I told him. He says, "I'll get right on it." And he did. Because when Mick's come out, he was just boiling. He was just steaming. He pointed his finger at me. He said, "I'll remember you." He said, "I'll always remember you. Don't you forget it." "That's your problem, fella, not mine." I didn't say anything. I didn't say that to him, of course. That's what I thought. But they went on strike. But, of course, they didn't do it out there. But on previous strikes and strikes after that, the union would go around with a couple of guys from personnel to make sure all the machines was shut off. Everything was put away where it belonged. So if that strike was over the next day, they'd come back to work and be no problem. Then on top of that, people were given slips so they could go through the picket line and go to work. Maintenance people. And if they had a line that they had problems with, this happened. And they wanted to do some repair work on that line, they'd go to the union, they'd say, "Well, we want to do some repair work on that line. This and this and this and this. We need X number of people. This is their names, the names, who we want to come in, what we want to do. And this is when we want to do it, right now while we got the time. Because we're not going to have time later. We'll have to shut down." Well, the union didn't want them shut down. So they'd okay these people to come in. And all they had to do was go to the gate, show their IDs, and they went in the plant and they went to work. Now, what more can you ask? But there were always some people on salary and the percentage got bigger as time went on, where they just had a different attitude. And
What would their attitude be?
"Oh, I'm better than you are. Hey, look at me." And it got so that, the old timers had left. The guys that came up through the Depression and the hard way. Yeah, they were, as I said, they were hard-nosed, and they were tough, but most of them were fair. Very few of them weren't. I had a run-in once with Lawrence Ginther with the union.
When was that?
Oh, gosh, I can't even remember the year. And he was a family friend. Good family friend.
What was the incident, Bruce?
Well, they had a little short guy. He was a chairman of the bargaining committee. Can't remember his name. He got in there and he got in a confrontation with and he used Ginther's office. He sent 2 sergeants down there to take him out, which was a mistake.
Was he fighting?
No, he wasn't fighting. He just wouldn't leave. And if they'd have sent a patrolman down there, wouldn't have been no problem. And they were looking for an incident. This guy was a feisty little fella, and he liked to show off. He liked his name in the paper. Loved to have his name in the paper. His name in the paper had been in the paper even after that incident several times. But he liked that. He liked the publicity.
So he was looking for an incident.
Oh yeah, he was looking for something. And a lot of us knew what he would do at anybody's expense. But he was elected chairman of the bargaining committee. There wasn't only so much you were going to do. So you had to be careful with him. And I got to know him pretty well. But this was the kind of a guy he was. And of course they had the confrontation in Ginther's office. And he wore a neck brace, and they had a picture in the State Journal, and they had a big deal over it. Big joke.
Now what union did he represent?
UAW. UAW, the Oldsmobile Union. And it took, I think it was about, it was a couple of contracts after that they got him out of there. I mean, he got out of his own accord. But boy, whenever he could, he got up there and got in the limelight. He always got a good job out of it. He always got a union job where he got paid, you know. And I always wondered if they didn't do that just to keep him quiet. It's just so he wouldn't stir things up.
You mentioned Bill Waldron.
Yeah.
You had an incident.
Yeah.
When was that? About?
Oh, that was just okay. We have a very. This is one of Hoffman's rules, for example. Car comes in the plant, inside the building. You're going to park it in the plant. You have to disconnect the battery, take the keys out, and disconnect the battery. So the battery cannot be connected again. I mean, you have to connect it. The cables have to be taken away from it. And
now this was if you're
this
just
is
in
the
a
car.
store,
No, if the car is coming in for display purposes, for example.
Yes.
Okay, this is what you do.
Okay.
Now, you can leave the car unlocked. That's okay. Raise the hood, raise the trunk, but you will disconnect the battery. And the car can't have over half a tank of gas in it. Now, this is for safety reasons. Well, Waldron kind of thought that was silly. And he mentioned the fact that he thought that was kind of a silly rule. If you were driving a truck in the plant to deliver something, you had to get permission from us to bring the truck in the plant first. That's the first thing you had to do. There were signs on all the doors. Any vehicle entering the plant has to have Plant Security's permission. Okay? Now, they had the same rule. Truck coming in the plant couldn't have over half a tank of gas in it. Truck coming in the plant under motion must drive with its lights on and in low gear. Lowest gear possible. And that was for safety reasons. And once they got in, they could shut everything off, unload what they had to, and take it out the same way. Well, he thought that was kind of silly. And I don't know how he felt really about it, but he joked about it. So it gave me that impression. I shouldn't say he thought that, but I thought that was my impression of it. So at my retirement party, he brought it up. Now, I didn't tell him just the day before out here where they were having a car showing.
Oh, out on the street?
Yeah. Guy got in the car, reached across with the car running. The car was stationary, nobody was in it. He reached across to turn the radio on. The car flopped down in gear. And guess what happened? 4 or 5 people got hurt and 3 or 4 cars got damaged. Now, the keys were taken out. That wouldn't have happened. That was one thing. The car was on display. They disconnected the battery. That's twice it wouldn't have. There's your backup. So one backs the other up. But you make sure of these things. Whenever they bring a car into Plant 5, I always went down and checked it. Sometime I would go down and check that car. Or Charlie would.
Now, Charlie was...
Charlie Davison. He was my partner. One of us would always go down and check the car every day. Just so somebody wouldn't come along and connect it. But I didn't tell Waldron that at my party, which was a very nice retirement party, I might add. And he did a very nice job, and I enjoyed it. But he did mention it. And I thought, well, you're not going to change it. Because I know Hoffman, he won't change it.
No. When did you retire? Your retirement
My official retirement date is June 1st.
June 1st of this year.
Mm-hmm.
So actually, we're a little ahead of time.
Yeah, but everything is done. I'm on vacation now. Yeah. But it's, you know, as I say, it's all changed.
Well, now, when we would have special events there, like we used to use
Mhm.
the auditorium often, were you on duty at
Yeah.
any of those? Okay, now, what would be your function? Say,
Well, one of our functions, they would have one of us at the back, at the entrance where they had, for example, they remember the Lucille and Johnny
yes.
thing. Okay.
Mhm.
When they had the Lucille and Johnny, I'll just use that for an example. It was one of us at the back gate, or one at the back entrance by the dressing room.
That would be at the west side?
Yeah, that would be on the west side. Then there would
be building 64.
64. Then there would be one guy in the lobby up in front.
Oh, yes.
Now that was done for several reasons. When they had a big crowd like that coming in, somebody always got to bring something to drink in. And of course that was forbidden. Whether it was the outdoor club or and that used to be, that, not the outdoor club, but the quarter century club. That used to be funny in heck. But we did that for a reason, for the security of it. It was mainly just to keep your eye on things. And they had the guys make the exhibit and display around the cloakroom. And it's whether it was a dinner party up there or what. But when Lucille and Johnny was there, one of us was in the back, and which was usually the case anyway. But one of us was in the back, and one would be in the front. And if it was a Christmas party, remember when they used to have the Christmas parties up there? One of us would be inside the auditorium, out of sight. As I said, nobody likes to see a blue uniform. So you stay back, unobservant and out of the way. That was just done to make sure nothing went wrong. Because if something did go wrong, you could step out there. And invariably, somebody would say, oh, geez, there they are. And they'd quiet right down.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's the way they worked it. And when they had the Lucille and Johnny show there, of course, the dressing rooms were in the back. And everybody wanted to get a peek at Florence Henderson. And I was back there at the time when she was back there. She didn't know me naturally from Adam's old fox. And she never spoke, and I didn't speak. And there was one after that. What was her name? One song she sang was Tennessee Waltz.
Peggy Lee.
No. She was blonde, though.
Not sure I remember it.
She was there during Wolfram's time.
Did you ever have any personal incidents with Mr. Wolfram, where you two might be together or around like the time?
Yeah, I had several. You really don't want to talk about that. I mean, they were not.
That's all right. Sure. What'd you think of John Belts?
He was a wildcat. He was a wildcat. I was walking the beat once. This was before he got sick. Of course, he was a plant manager, but I knew him when he was head of the engineering. Now, he was a nice guy. Don't misunderstand me. But as I say, he was a wildcat, and he was different. But they had a meeting on a Sunday up there, and I don't even remember who was always in that meeting.
In the building 70?
No, in building 70, up on the 6th floor.
Okay.
And it was in the big conference room. And of course, at that time, we were having a lot of trouble with black kids in the neighborhood. They would come down and they would take black pencils and write on this marble in front, and it was almost impossible to get off. They had an awful time getting that stuff off. Well, we would check that every time you walked through on the beat. And when I was on my way, the guy who told me when he came, he said, "There's a couple of kids out there." He said, "When you get a chance," he says, "take a look." He said that he went through the auditorium, went through that conference room, So when I got up there, naturally, I unlocked the door and went walking in. I was about halfway in the room when I looked over, and here was Belch looking at me. And all these people were looking at me. I didn't even see him. I just looked at him, and I don't know why I said it to this day. I said, well, the entertainment committee isn't going to be able to get here because they had to cancel, and I don't know why. So I went, and I kept right on going. That was too late now. So I looked out the window, and I looked down the front, both sides, and of course the kids were gone. I turned around and went back. He just waited till I got gone, and I presume he kept on. But I never heard anything about it. He never asked me about it. But he went to some doctors out by East Lansing in the building out there. And we were sitting out there in the doctor's office. I had a lung problem. And of course he had his problem. And we talked there for a while. I liked him. I did. I liked him. As I say, he was a wildcat. I imagine if you were at his level, you know, in job classification, that he would probably keep other people on edge, because he just seemed to be able to do that with such ease.
Did you ever have an occasion to be around Howard Carroll?
No.
Okay, or Harold Metzel when they were general manager or chief engineer?
I remember Metzel when he was chief engineer and general manager. I think that's enough said.
Okay. What about Joe Sanchez?
Very, very likable. Very likable. That man never walked by that he didn't stop and shake hands. Now, naturally, you know, there's no way he can remember that many names, people. But he never came out to Plant 5 that he didn't stop and say howdy. I thought he just, I don't know, he just had the ability to make people work harder. I felt better. I thought, geez, well, finally we got somebody at the helm that's... Cook was nice. Cook was always pleasant.
Did you have any occasions to be around Mr. Cook?
No. No.
Would he be coming out in the plant?
When I did see him out in the plant, yeah, but you know, the difference between his job and mine was like a mountain, and I was at the bottom. And but he was always nice. The higher you seem to go, in that era, time, you got nice people to deal with. There were some exceptions, but most of them, it was the middle ones, not the lower ones. It was the ones in the middle. They seemed to think that I'm better than everybody else. But it wasn't always that way. It just slowly seemed to get that way. When the jet plant first opened up, they sent a lot of good people out there, which normally what happens is they send their worst. What a superintendent does, he gets rid of his worst ones. But they sent some good people out there to make it work. But this was the old way. This was in the 50s. We want to make this work, so we're going to send some people out there who will make it work. And they did. Well, they had that jet program going on in several months prior to when they thought they were really going to get it going. But these were the same people, the very same people. If that car was supposed to come off at 3:18, that car came off the line at 3:18. Not 3:20, not 3:19, 3:18. You could plan on it. You could live by it. This was a new model. And I can remember Lawrence Kintzer one time. As I say, these were the old people. Telling a plant manager in 1963 it wasn't going to work and he wasn't going to do it.
Who was plant manager?
Wolfram. Wolfram says it will work and you will do it. He said, I won't do it. And he didn't. He said, it costs too much money. We're not going to do it.
What was Wolfram's response?
Oh, he blew his tag. And don't ask me how I know that, 'cause I won't tell you. But I do know it happened. And I believe it happened without any doubt in my mind whatsoever. Yeah, you remember in 1963, the front fenders, the ridge on the front fenders? Wolfram wanted it higher. Ginther said no. It will not be higher. Now, Ginther was a strong person, very strong. And Wolfram says, oh, it'll be the way I want it. You can have it any way you want it, but this is the way I'm going to build it. And that's the way you build it. And it was 69, for example, when they had trouble with the front ends of the cars. And there again,
Now, what trouble?
the front end suspension collapsed. And he said, hey, this don't work. And we told you it wasn't going to work, and you guys demanded it. And that's, after that, you begin to notice it. You know, you begin to notice they just didn't seem to get the same people there after that. Now that wasn't just, that was one of the last incidents that I really knew about. Bumpers were another thing. They wanted to change the bumpers. They wanted to split the bumper. Oldsmobile had the old massive bumper, always did. Ginther said, no, cost too much, make the dies.
To split it.
Yeah. Scott, cost too much to plate it. You got to use more plating. You got to use more conveyors. You got to have more hangers. When I went out to Plant 5, who the heck was in charge then? Oh, his name's right on the tip of my tongue. Real nice fella. He was in charge out to Plant 5.
Broadman?
No. No, he'd been long gone.
Mollering?
No. The heck was his name?
Was he the plant manager?
Yeah. Can't think of his name right now.
We can check that out.
And then after that was a guy that came, his father worked in our department. His father worked in our department.
Remember that name?
There again, it's right on the tip of my tongue.
He was the plant manager?
Yeah, he was the plant manager. His son was the plant manager.
Okay.
And he was just like his father. Just exactly like his father.
How was that?
His father was a nice man. Very nice man. He was related to Skinner somehow. Back when Skinner was the plant manager when I came to work for him. And then shortly after I went on, either just before I went on or just shortly after I went on, Wolfram took over. I don't remember exactly when it was. Wolfram took over. But Skinner was when I understand he lost a son in Korea.
Yes, he did. So Mr. Skinner wasn't there very long after you came.
Yeah, he wasn't. But
did you see him off in the plant?
I never saw him. Never.
Did any of the general managers seem to walk off in the plant unexpectedly?
Yeah, Wolfram did on Saturdays and Sundays.
Okay.
In fact, you remember when the Starfire came out?
Yes.
He took one day. Just took it. Got in it and took it. Those cars were not. The publicity wasn't out on them. The date wasn't out on him. He just took it and drove it home. Well, and of course, Wolfram, he drove right through the gate. Well, guess what happened? We had 2 or 3 cars chasing him. We were going to get him. And I was the last one out the gate after him. And it just happened to be that Murray Wolfram was a sergeant. Same name. And he caught him. And so he talked to him for a while. And of course, by that time, it was bang, bang, bang. It was cars just staggering right around him, you know. Because what you did was you pull his car over. Murray pulled this way. The next guy pulls this way. The next guy pulls behind him. He ain't going to go nowhere.
No.
So when I was the last car, so I just pulled up behind him. If he would have backed up and tried to go around over the curb or anything like that, I'd got around in front of him. So, but it was a convertible he had, and I was back far enough so that I couldn't see who the driver was. But the sergeant was up there talking, and 2 patrolmen were up there, so I didn't think they needed me.
No.
So pretty soon, Murray, he just waved his hand, and we all got back in our cars, which was a signal going back. So I turned the car around and went back. He got back, he just shook his head. He told me who it was, and I said, geez. But that was Wolfram. You'd see him walking in the plant. But when I went out to plant, I wish I could remember those people's names. Probably 15 minutes after I leave here, they'll come to me. And after the last one left,
Plant 5.
yeah, both of them retired. And then one day, the last one, just as he was leaving, he brought this fella, and this little guy. He wasn't a very big man. And he brought him up to the window, and he said, Bruce, I want you to meet the new plant manager. And I looked at this little fella standing there before me, and I thought, well, he's not very impressive. And he wasn't. He wasn't an impressive person when you first met him. Very pleasant, very nice. But he didn't really impress me.
You can't remember his name.
Because his name was Chuck Coster.
Chuck Coster.
Yeah. But he sure did in a hurry. He sure did in a hurry. He went back and took over. A couple of weeks went by. He stopped in the squad room a couple of times. He said, why do you encourage people to come back here? I said, well, we can talk to them. I said, if you want to talk to somebody out there about something that you don't want anybody else to know about, you bring them in here. He said, you have to talk to that many people? I said, no, but if a guy comes back here to talk to you, and everybody sees him going back and forth, nobody thinks anything of it, do they? I said, no. I said, well, that's what we do it for. If you want a cup of coffee, get a cup of coffee. Nobody say anything. It works. Is you sure it works? I said, yeah. He said, well, he said, I'll tell you. He said, I came in here because he said, I don't like the way you run in the parking lot. I said, well, what do you want to do? He said, I want you to set up some rules. And I said, well, I can do that.
What was the matter with the parking lot?
Oh, it was a mess. People parked any way they wanted to, anywhere they wanted to. And he said, I'd like it by this afternoon. I said, I'll have it in about 15 minutes, as soon as I can write it out. It's okay. I said, well, we'll see what kind of salt you got, pal. So I wrote 5 rules down.
What were those, do you remember?
Yeah. You won't park over the yellow line. You will park between the yellow lines. You will not park in handicap areas. If you do, we will call the county, and you will get 2 tickets. 1 ticket from us, and 1 ticket from the county. We had to drop the ticket from us because that would be what they call double jeopardy, and that's 2 punishments, and they wouldn't allow that. That's against the law. So we dropped that portion of it. We just went to the county, which at that time cost, I think, $50 if you got a ticket, which we would call the county. And then I think the 3rd rule was you cannot back in against the flow of traffic because that creates accidents. And I think the fourth rule was, after 3 tickets, 3 violations, we will tow your car. There was a 5th rule. I don't really remember what that was, but I took him in and I laid him on his desk. He says, well, I'll get this checked with by the legal people. I'll get back with you. Next day he got back with me and he says, this is the portion we got to drop. That's the portion that I mentioned about the ticket. I said, okay. And I said, we've come up with these rules and we'll put them on the bulletin boards. You sign them because you're the plant manager. Now, are you going to enforce them? Because if you enforce them, we'll enforce them. But if you don't enforce them, we're not going to enforce them. Do you get what I mean? He says, I get what you mean. He said, you follow those rules right to the letter, and you'll hear no squawk out of me or anybody else. Okay. We'll test you, find out. So we put them on it. We made it out. We put it on the bulletin board. We'll leave it on there 30 days. We did it. Buddy, you're going to get a rude awakening. Made sure that every department got a copy. Made sure the union committee men all got a copy. We did our homework. But what I didn't tell them, when we wrote a ticket, when we had to tow a car, we'd take pictures of that car to show the violation, the 3rd violation, not the first 2. But the 3rd violation, we'd do that. Well, came along, 3rd violation, we towed a car. And the guy came in just raising the roof. It's a rule. He went to his committee man, he went, of course, it got up to Coster. That's the rule. They're going to enforce it, I'm going to enforce it. That's it. Well, the guy was out. I think it cost $25 then to get your car when you got your car towed.
Where would you tow it? Over?
We call Schroyers or anybody else that wanted to. Yeah, they'd come out and get the car and hook onto it. We did that 3 or 4 times in 1 month. Now, of course, I had told Coster, I said, now, if you do this, you're going to take some flack for probably 90 days over it. Because it takes them a long time before enough of them will get the message. Mm-hmm. They think it's like the main plant. It's a joke. Right. And he said, this is no joke. He said, I park out in that parking lot. He said, that's the way this plant was set up. I park out there in that parking lot. And if I park out there, I want a decent place to park, and I don't want a disorderly parking lot. He said, this is what people see when they drive back and forth across the front of this plant, Bruce. Or they fly over it. I've flown over this plant. He said, do you know what that parking lot looks like from up there? And I said, no. He said, terrible. He said, that's the first thing you notice, the parking lot. It's a silly thing, isn't it? I said, yeah. Well, he said, we're going to eliminate that. He did. We towed cars out of there. So when he left, they brought another guy in, this was Bill Waldron. He wasn't ready for us. Wasn't ready for it. So we towed a car while he was there. He hadn't been there very long. The guy hadn't even got his feet wet yet. And he came in and asked about this car being towed. And somebody else did. Of course, when we wrote the ticket, made arrangements to tow the car, personnel people always tend to take a back seat. Personnel people do not like to make decisions. They like to work around decisions, but they don't like to make decisions. That's my experience and my opinion. And they'll put something off or bury it if they can over here. As I say, that's my opinion. And the personnel person came out and said he would rather that we didn't. And I said, no, sir. I said, I've got a boss I have to answer to. And I said, that was the agreement. And that's the way we're holding it. So I did call I called Badger, boss.
Your boss was who?
Bill Badgero at the time. I told him, I said, no, we got this. He said, do it. Well, the guy went in there with committee man, and he decided to pay the $50. Now they're going to set up some rules in parking. So they gave the whole program to Lonnie Dawkins. Dawkins. Yeah, now Lonnie Dawkins is the black guy. And I've had too many bad experiences with black people. And I thought, uh-oh, what are we going to get into here? So Lonnie came in. Of course, I was the guy that was responsible for doing all this, for towing the cars, this particular car that they had paid for. So Lonnie said, I don't think you guys did a very good job there. I said, by whose standards? Well, he said, that's what I was told. He said, your tickets here, he said, we Xerox, made copies of all the tickets and the date, which were all within a 3-month period. He said, well, yeah, the 5th rule, I never remember now. Any ticket over a year old was destroyed. Unless you've got a ticket in the previous, in the next year. But we destroyed him anyway. We just didn't say nothing. We just destroyed him. And anyway, I said, well, why? And he said, well, the guy, of course, I knew this was all coming down. I've been in this racket for a long time, so I went out there to find out, the background of it, if I could. The guy was supposed to be to work at 6:30 in the morning, okay? There was snow on the ground. They had the crews out, clearing the parking lot. So I said, well, okay. That's fine, go along with that. I didn't tell him I'd taken pictures of it. I was going to hold that for my ace in the hole. So I said, he said the ground was not, it was still snow on the, and he couldn't see the yellow lines. And he was parked at the end of the aisle. I said, but it was his 3rd ticket. Yeah, but he said, Bruce, he couldn't see it. I said, he couldn't. And I pulled a picture. I said, look at that picture right there. And I said, is that a picture of the car, the truck? Actually, it was a truck. Is that a picture of the truck? That's the side view? Yeah. Can you see the yellow line? Yeah. You can see the yellow line. Yeah. I said, here's another picture. I said, can you see the yellow line? Yeah. Here's the other picture. Can you see the yellow line? I said, this is front, side, back. He says, you didn't tell us you had these, and you didn't ask. I said, you guys in there went off, and you were gonna cut a fat hog, and it didn't work. Now you got egg on your face. And you're the guy that's got it. I'm sorry. But I want to take this into Walden. He said, that won't be necessary. I said, okay. Whatever you say, you're going to do it. Well, it ended up they left the rules as they were. And which, that pleased me, because it showed me that, well, somebody's at least trying somewhere. And this guy, this Dawkins impressed me. He impressed me. Hey, I'm gonna do a good job, which he did. I think he was more than fair. This happened. I'm sorry. You weren't consulted. You guys should have been consulted, but you weren't. And it won't happen again. Now let's put it behind us. Which, that's what it should be. So that's the way they did it. But, yeah, as I say, things have changed, so. Things have changed.
How many people do they have working out there at Plant 5?
Security people? 2. 2 and a desk person.
It's quite a large facility for that
Mm-hmm.
few people, isn't it?
Well, we're very lucky out there, because most of the guys out there are high seniority people. We used to say that's where they send the old men, because they're just about on their way out. I suppose you could say that's true, but also we don't have a supervisor. We just were out there all by ourselves, so we do everything that we're supposed to do. For a long time, we did our own time. It was never questioned.
Do they still have time clocks that they punch?
No, that time clocks went out when remember the old Hugh Lyons plant?
Yes.
Time clocks went out about that time. Of course, they had actually, in the plant itself, the time clocks were gone. They had fire alarm boxes all over. I'm sure you can remember seeing those.
But what would the plant security officer be doing, like in Building 70, just on the 6th level there, out in the hall, the back hall?
It's a box out there.
Yeah. And
Fire alarm box.
That would be a fire.
Yeah. See, those fire alarms, what people don't understand is when a guy went out and hit that box, he did two things. He told them where he was at right then, downtown. He also told them that firebox was still functioning.
Okay.
Every hour.
Now you say downtown. That
ADT.
At the main
At the ADT office. That was all the,
CDT.
I think it's called American District Telegraph.
Oh.
They
They had a board
yeah,
that registered the location
yeah.
or the call.
They wanted to get that put in our, do it ourselves. Everything ourselves. But for some reason, I guess the budget wouldn't call for it.
Let me see.
But it would have been cheaper in the long run had they done it that way.
Well, let me ask you, I remember one 3-day holiday in the summer, it could have been the 4th of July, where the water sprinklers went off because of the sun shining through the windows on the 6th level there. And there was a lot of water came down, enough to go down into the 5th level.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't that have been caught? Why?
Well, you got to remember that a sprinkler system is a 2.5-inch line or 3-inch line. It gets bigger as it goes back to the main line, and smaller as it goes out. Okay, each sprinkler will kick out an awful lot of water. But the heat temperature, the temperature from the outside coming through that window, it actuated that particular sprinkler. It melted the lead is what it did.
I see.
It melted the lead, and when the lead melted, of course, sprinkler went off. It doesn't take just a very, very few minutes, and everything is drenched.
Well, but why wouldn't, isn't there a board someplace
Mhm.
in the plant where people should be
That's
watching?
right.
Why wouldn't that have been observed if something was
It was done.
wrong was happening?
It did. It was done. You got to remember, there's water coming up, pressure coming up. Kick that water out, and that pipe is that big around.
Well, that looks about 18 inches.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, it's about that big around, and of course it's all the way to the top. It's all the way to the top of the 6th floor.
Oh, yes.
Okay, that size. Then it branches out. So you've got all that pressure coming up there. It's 100, if I remember right, it's 120 pounds.
Pressure?
Yeah, that's what it's kept at. Now, when one of those sprinklers goes up to 150.
Oh.
Just like that. That's automatic. Okay, when it goes up there, naturally, when that sprinkler goes, it's going to jar some other ones. Now, I don't remember how many sprinklers went off, but I know there was more than one went off that day. Well, they got a tool. We can go up there and clamp on it. At that time, that you're referring to, we didn't have that tool.
I see.
They had to, that was another thing. The tool room designed that tool.
Oh.
To come up there, we could go up there. Of course, the guy that was going to go up there and do it was going to get drenched. He was going to get drenched, but before they had this tool, they had to drain that whole system before they could repair that.
Oh.
Shut it off, and the whole system had to be drained. Now, when that system is once drained, you can only turn it on a half a turn at a time because of the pressure. You'll blow them right back out again. You blow those little sprinklers. They're only about that big around. But boy, do they kick the water out.
Yes.
That probably doesn't, the stream coming out of there isn't big around in your thumb. But you probably had about 4 or 5 sprinklers go off.
Well, then there
So you had to drain the whole system.
there's no board over in some main security office
Yeah.
that would tell you when something is happening in the part of the
And,
plant?
yep, there's every single building. There's a tape over there.
Okay.
And the guy sits there and, okay, we'll use the numbers 292. And go, it'll come up ding, 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 and that's a sign that you got an alarm going off.
Problem in 292?
No, not yet. Then it'll come up 2, it'll go ding, ding, then it'll be a pause. It'll go ding, 9 times, then it's a pause, and it'll ding, ding. That'll tell you exactly where it is.
Will it tell you what is the problem?
Yep, it's water. That tape is just for water.
Oh.
Okay? Now if you've got a fire, I mean that covers of course the water. But that's the sprinkler system for the whole plant. It comes up on it. Each plant has the same thing. Each one. Now it's all done by computers.
Oh.
But that was back then. But now it's all done by computer. You look over there, it gives you the bay location, which we didn't have at that time. We just had the sprinkler system. So it's progressed quite. It's really progressed well.
To an art.
Yeah, and it's all done by computers, and it comes up on a little screen. It'll tell you the system is going down and where it is, and what where to go to shut it off. So you don't have to keep a book with you all the time, because you can't remember it all. You don't have to keep a book on your back pocket. Most of us used to, still carry them. The older guys particularly, because you never knew when that thing was going to flunk up. And so that was what we used to do. But yeah, I know what you're talking about. I remember that. I also remember the times that, I'm sure you're the one, when you worked in public relations, I can remember you having to come in on holidays and answer. We would get calls. Remember when you used to get calls from and I used to answer the phone. I used to work the desk. I used to answer the phone, and people would be calling for complaints or something about their cars or parts, or plant was shut down, and we'd just send them those calls up to you. I don't know how many years we've done that.
I never knew then who I was talking to.
Yeah. Used to joke about a martini,
Yeah.
especially after a bad day.
Yes, I remember.
Yeah. Yeah, those were. But in spite of the fact that everybody tried to take care of them. Now you came in on a holiday, but other places didn't do that.
Well, I liked my work.
Yeah, I don't know what you did to those people. That's none of my business. But when I got the call,
We tried to help them.
yeah, I knew what I had to do. What are you going to do? I'm going to send this up to Helen Earley. I'm going to transfer the call up there, or I'm going to have it. I knew your number. And at that time, we didn't have that transfer. Remember, we didn't have that transfer capability. Now they do. But I used to tell them to call this number. This is the Plant Security Department. I tell them why. And I really am not in a position to help you because I can't. It's not our function. But if you call this lady, she'll talk to you at least about it. And yeah, I remember. I don't know how many calls I used to field up there.
I know. I remember too that when I was working late some nights in old building 60, some of your people would be going by in the hall on their beat, and
Every hour.
well, they would say, when are you going to leave? Well, maybe 10, 11 o'clock at night. I'll walk you to your car.
Yeah.
Let me know when you're ready to leave, and I'll walk you to your car. Of course, Oldsmobile parking lots are pretty well lighted,
Mm-hmm.
but I thought that was a nice
Yeah.
gesture.
Yeah, we used to. I remember one of the nurses, as I said before, they had. I don't know. I never knew who the heck hired those people, but they sure got top quality people. Always got top quality. Never once was I ever on an emergency that nurse wasn't outstanding. Even the ones they got now,
You remembered Marge Reardon.
Marge Reardon very well. There was Rosemary Fowler. Oh God, Pat Krasner. there was another jewel. She was super. She was super. They had a gal out to Plant 5. She was schizo. And Pat knew all these people out there, knew all their problems. And people go in and when they didn't feel good or personal problems or whatever. And she was really good, but she knew this gal. And this gal just used to scare me half to death. I really didn't know how to handle her. I didn't know what to do. Didn't have the, I just didn't have the knowledge how to, This lady was sick.
You mean mentally ill?
Yeah, she was mentally ill. And she was walking down the hall one day ahead of me. She kept turning around looking at me. And she had a funny look in her eye. Finally, she walked back. She said, "Why did you take my children away from me?" I thought, uh-oh. I said, "Well, I didn't take your children away from you, but I think you better come on and we'll go down and talk to Pat." And this was the kind of a relationship you had. She says, "Is something wrong?" And I said, "I think so," but I said, "You better come down to get somebody that knows how to handle it." So she walked right along, went down and got in to see Pat. Pat just looked at me and said, "You've been taking your medicine?" "I forgot it this morning." "Have you got that spare?" It's down in my coat pocket or whatever. "Go get it and bring it back here." And she looked at me and she said, "You follow her down there, but don't go with her all the way. Just keep your eye on her." "No problem." Did it. She come back. Pat said, "You take your medicine." She took her medicine. 15 minutes later, she walked back out there. She was all right. This is the kind of person she was. This is the quality of the people you had.
Well,
Really.
the way you two worked together, too.
Yeah, there was no friction. There was no problems. She was sharp. She was really sharp. There was a fellow there. He's still working, so I won't say his name. But he had a problem. He really had it. And he'd sing. He'd either sing some religious song or the Halls of Montezuma. Brings him.
Did he have a nice voice?
No, about as bad as mine. That's pretty bad. When I sing, even in the shower, the water's stopping on him. But he was out there, and there was a whole bunch of people from General Motors. Now these were I would say probably 7, 8, and unclassified people were in there.
Now this is at Plant 5.
Yeah, and there was probably about 8 or 10 of them. And he came walking around the corner singing the Halls of Montezuma, and they were all standing there looking at him. I thought, oh, wow, what am I going to do with this? I'll give you his first name, and his first name was Larry. And I said, "Larry, you okay?" He says, "Don't you like my song?" I said, "Well, you think I should go down there?" I said, "It might be a good idea." I said, "You want me to go with you?" "No," I said, "I can get down there." "Okay." So I called back, told her he was coming.
Did you stop singing Halls of Montezuma?
Well, I waited till he got through. With those kind of people, you don't know.
Right.
So you just wait. Now I know, look, it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing for you. It's embarrassing to those people out there because they see it. And people are going to be people. They're going to think down on somebody like that. Then you got to think of him. So what's the overall value going to be? Let him finish it, and then very quietly take it out of sight. And that's what I did. Call Pat. That's how I'll take care of it. But he got into. He was a nice guy. He still was a nice guy, but very easily influenced. And there was a guy down there that belonged to some religious church, and I don't remember what the heck it was, but you didn't need to take all those pills. Well, Larry stopped taking his pills, and he got sick, and he was off on sick leave for about 3 months before they brought him back. So when they brought him back, I found out about this guy, and so I went down and told him, which was not my job, and I shouldn't have done it. I said, if you ever do anything like that again, ever even think about it, and I'm around here, I'm going to tell everybody what kind of a guy you are, and they're going to run you out of here on a rail. And I said, I'll help them. Don't forget it. You got that right? You got it clear? He says, you can't do that. I said, watch me. I said, if you got any doubts, you go ask the committee man what I'll do. You go ask that committee man what I'll do. And you find out I'll do anything I want to. I will do it. You never had no more trouble with him.
You mean because of his religious belief he was...
He influenced poor Larry. Yeah, he would influence poor Larry not to take his medicine.
I see.
Well, his wife had called Pat, and Pat had said, I don't think Larry's taking his medicine. His wife called me. Now, see, she didn't have to go way out like that.
No.
But she did. Larry told his wife, if anything was going wrong, call Pat. Yeah. Lots of times.
Now, if we had special groups coming through, was there always a plant security person along with them too?
Used to be, years ago. But only remember when they had the trains and the tours, plant tours?
Right.
Okay, when they used to walk through the plant, one of us would bring the tail end up and keep them grouped up as much as you could.
Okay.
In later years, they used to have the open house, and the whole day shift was brought in just to cover that. And they had you stationed every so often around the plant.
Oh.
Just so people wouldn't get up next to the machinery. We realized what would happen if somebody got in with some of the big old bliss presses. They'd cut them in half and nothing flat. But that's what they did. And it worked. And I felt that they got a lot of good relations out of that. I really do. The car showings which they have out there in June, I think they get a lot of good public relations out of there.
Now, do Plant Security works those too?
Yeah, they usually send a guy out there. And all he does is really stand around and see what they don't understand. Sometimes that uniform just stands there enough to deter everything.
True.
You don't have to do anything. And if you want to get people upset, just walk fast.
Oh, yes.
And if next time you go into a restaurant, you're on the road on vacation or whatever, and you see a police cruiser pull up, you just sit there in the restaurant. Don't watch those police officers when they come through the door. You'll hear the door open. Watch around the room. Watch that whole room. Every single eyeball will hit those cops before they hit their chairs. Every single eyeball in that room will hit them. And some people that are a little bolder than others will wait till they're sitting down and having their dinner. They'll come up and tell those guys about a ticket they got. We used to get that all the time. What do you think about this guy? Give me a ticket. Yak, 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 and they tell you all about a ticket. You can't do anything about a ticket. Some of the guys would sympathize with them. I never did. You got a ticket? Yeah, you probably got what you deserved. Well, he said, you ever got a ticket? And I said, yeah, you deserved it too. Didn't like it, but I got it. But yeah, anytime you get a blue uniform with a badge on his chest, that signifies, and I don't know whether it's a guilt feeling some people have. Maybe they did something when they were 5 years old, I don't know. But you walk in the door. I used to notice it when I walked in the cafeteria. Every eyeball would, sooner or later, would hit you.
So just being there.
Yeah. And it's not that way anymore. See, when they took us out of the plant,
What do you mean took you out of the plant?
okay, we used to have patrols in the plant. Not many. Because
What part of the plant would you patrol?
the whole plant.
At Plant 1.
At Plant 1. And like there's 2 guys out to Plant 5, one guy is out at the gate and the other guy's walking around in the plant.
Mm-hmm.
I used to make it a habit of walking around the plant at least 4 times a day. And that's not hard to do. But you do it, besides the other things that you have to do. Like 2 hours out at the gate, and 2 hours in. And then you have to relieve the guy for lunch, and relieve your own lunch, handle emergencies or whatever is going on. Plant protection is just is a diversified. Is a very diversified job. You do anything really that nobody else wants to do. In some cases, nobody else can do.
Was Division Street gate always the main gate?
Division and Elm Street gate were always the main gates.
Oh, and Elm too.
Yeah, they were the truck gates. That's where your traffic would go. And they always had 2 men assigned there. One man to handle the pedestrian traffic, one man to handle the truck. You could only handle the truck traffic when things are going really, like people in the plant working 12 hours a day and et cetera. You surely can remember those days.
Mm-hmm.
He could only handle it maybe for half hour. It was just all you could do. Yeah, it was all you could do. It was all you could do. Back, remember back when they had when they were shooting at the steel truck drivers?
Oh, when was that?
Well, that was 10, 15 years ago.
No.
Maybe it was a little longer than that. But they were shooting at. I don't know who was shooting at them.
Kids?
No, I guess it was they had union problems,
Oh, I see.
and Teamsters get pretty violent. The Teamster Union. I guess the most honest thing I can say is a lot of them weren't gentlemen.
They were not.
They were not nice people to deal with. They were very difficult. And you were the first ones they ran into. And like newspaper people, they try to bowl you over,
Mm-hmm.
and you can't let them do that. When Coster was here, well, I'll tell you about that. What was I saying?
You were mentioning
the steel truck drivers. They had a company in the union, the Teamsters, General Motors, and they had all agreed that after so long a time, when they entered the plant, they had to be unloaded, or they got downtime for their vehicles and their drivers. And
that was to speed up the.
That was to speed up the unloading. And Hess used to be a big steel hauler. Plus, they had a lot of independents. Okay, these trucks were all lined up on Elm Street Gate. No, Townsend Street Gate. And they'd run right up around Building 70 and all the way up. That was before they had the two-way street. And yeah, and they would even back when old Building 60 was there, they would line up on Olds Avenue and all over, William Street.
Okay.
And there was probably 8-10 trucks out there and I was working Elm Street Gate. And things were going along just good. They weren't going real fast, and no, they were going slow. Next thing I know, here come these 2 cars full of state troopers. And there was a corporal in charge. And he had a whole bunch of what the state police call we call them cadets, they call them. I forgot what they call them. I guess after they graduate from the academy, they call them cubs. But during the academy time, they're called cadets. But they were looking for this one truck driver. And although the company says that you can go in a guy's truck and look, don't try it. Most of them will raise all kinds of hell. You get in that truck, they don't like it. That's their home. A lot of them spend a lot of time there. More time there than they do at home. And they got sleepers back there. So they wanted to search this one truck. And they had a warrant. They had everything they needed. I said, well, it's not my problem. It's on a public street. I said, do whatever you want to do. The problem's with him, not me. Well, we just want you to know. I said, okay. This guy had a scheduled time in. So he was out there about an hour. So I walked out there when the scheduled time came in. He has to be called in within a half hour of that scheduled time. And he'd been coming up here for years. I didn't know his name, but I knew his face. I knew his truck. So he was just standing there. And I thought he got a kind of a funny look when I walked up, but I didn't say anything. I said, this guy's got less than a half hour before I have to let him in the plant. I said, General Motors is not going to pay downtime for this. And I said, I told the corporal, you had an hour to search this truck. You can't find what you're looking for in an hour. I can give you about 15 minutes, and that's about it. I said, I can't do any more than that. Otherwise, I got to tell him to come in, and you can do whatever you want to do. You got the power to hold him up, but I haven't got the power to hold him up, and I'm not gonna. Well, Corporal was pretty upset about it, but I said, no, I ain't gonna do that. Well, they finally decided. As I said, there were 2 cars of these young troopers. They couldn't find anything.
I wonder what they were looking for.
Well, sure, I knew what they were looking for. The guy had a gun somewhere. A lot of your truck drivers carry guns. A lot of them. I mean, they carry the heavier calibers too. They don't. Some of them got shotguns in their cars, sawed-off shotguns.
Well, couldn't they get a permit to carry a gun?
No, I don't think so, because they travel from state to state.
Oh, I see.
And legally, you can't go up into the cab if you've got a sleeper. You got to be careful. You can look up like this into the cab. That's as far as you better go.
You can't see anything.
And you better not get up there,
I see.
because that's considered his home, and you better be careful. I never had any problem with it. I had to search a truck. I'd ask the guy, hey, I got to get 2 or 3 of these a day. Can I search your truck? Anything you want to search, go ahead, but don't get back in my bunk. Well, you would. You wouldn't get back in his bunk. Most of them, after so many years, particularly steel haul drivers, you got to know until the last few years, and you don't know who the hell's driving, or what they're doing, or what they're popping. But in this particular case, I let the guy in. And of course, when he came out, I was there. I looked up at him. He looked down and he said, well, how you doing? I said, fine. I couldn't help it. I said, what were they looking for you for? He's down in Ohio. He said, I saw this car pulling up when I pulled out of town. He said, I saw it because I was getting ready to get on the freeway. He said, I saw a little iron sticking up. So I just took this, and it had an old German broom handle, big pistol, 9mm. He said, I just picked my friend up here, and I leaned out and gave him a few. I looked at that, and I said, Jesus. Well, good luck. He says, well, they didn't find it. And I said, I see they didn't. And I looked right at him. I said, I'm not going to tell him either. So you didn't. But a lot of your long haul drivers carry guns. They have to. They have to.
You mentioned Bill Wedge as an investigator. Do you remember any interesting incidents that you found in with him?
I worked for him for a while.
Oh, you did?
Yeah. I didn't. Frankly, I didn't do too good. Do you remember the time when they had all the trouble with the tachometers being stolen? That was back in the 50s?
No, I don't.
Well, they had a lot of trouble with tachometers being stolen. They were just stealing them right and left, taking them right out of cars, production cars. So I was just going by Purchase's office. He called me in there and he said, I want you to go home and change your clothes. And he said, work for Bill Wedge for a couple of weeks. He says, can you do that? And I said, yeah, I can do that. So I did. And we broke it up. We broke it up between us. We broke it up. I think, it was Joe Toast, myself, and...
Joe Toast?
Joe Toast, yeah, he's dead now.
Okay.
He became an alcoholic. The sauce, I think, killed him. And there was another guy. The heck was his name? I can't remember his name now. But we all got on it, and we all done a group. A lot of it was done in your own time.
Well, how would you go about doing that?
Well, you just walk around the parking lot, look in the cars. Couldn't touch them.
You didn't have your uniform on.
No, you didn't have your uniform on.
Okay, all right.
But you could walk around and look at the car, but you couldn't touch it.
Well, then what would you be looking for a tachometer?
You'd be looking for a tachometer or anything else.
That was already installed in the car?
Yeah, they'd install it. No, not installed in the car. You'd see it. It would be installed in the car, but it would be an Oldsmobile current production tachometer.
Oh, you could recognize
Yeah.
that it wasn't a production
Yeah,
car.
it wasn't one they should have,
I see.
and they weren't being sold. There was only one way they could get them: steal them.
I see.
Trouble is, we didn't know where they were stealing them from.
Well, what
Because
would you do then, make a record of
we'd
the
just take the license number of the car, and then we'd see who owned it, and we'd see if they worked for Olds. Well, we got a guy that was, his father was a superintendent, and he worked in the plant, and we nailed him. He was a ringleader, one of the ringleaders. And I wondered what they were going to do. I really wondered what they were going to do, because there's the old saying, rank has its privileges.
Did the father know what was happening?
Father didn't have any idea what was going on. In fact, frankly, the father was really tore up about it, really tore up. It really affected the father. In fact, I think he had to take almost a week off because of what happened.
Well, how would this young fellow get these?
They were stealing them out. They were rejects that they were stealing them out of Plant 3.
Were they stored out there?
They were stored out there prior to shipment.
Back to the
manufacturer. And nobody had thought to count them. Because as they would come in, they were tossed in a bin. When the bin got so full, they'd ship it.
I see.
And so they'd just come out and take 5 or 6 a day. They were getting $20 a piece for them. Back then, that was a lot of
They
money.
must have had a lot of rejects, so on that particular unit.
I think they did. They were not a well-built tachometer at all.
Okay.
But anyway, we got him, and then there was a vice president's son. He had 4 of them, and he was going to GMI, and I wondered what they were going to do about that. And they fired him. And he lost his schooling.
Both these fellows?
Both these fellows, they fired him, and they lost. Of course, the one boy lost his schooling, and GM, of course, Oldsmobile had sponsored him, and he lost everything. And the one guy, his wife, the one fellow that was his father, that was the general foreman, his wife worked in the plant. I had to go down and get her too. And I knew her. I'd went to school with her. And I remember just standing there and I thought, oh God, I don't like this. But it didn't really bother me because she wasn't involved. And I knew her in school and she was a real nice person. They fired him. They didn't fire, of course they wouldn't fire her. They had the goods on him. And he would go around and pick them up and deliver them to certain people. And they'd peddle them. So he was the kingpin. He got $10 a piece for them. For everyone. He was making all kinds of. His wife said, I don't know. I said, I've been wondering where he's been getting his money. So, but I still worked for Wedge off and on after that.
What kind of a man was he to work with?
Real nice. Very much of a gentleman. A lot gentler. A lot kinder than most people would expect somebody in that kind of a position to be. When the man was caught stealing, he never refused that man a right to come back to work. And it was in his power to do so if he wanted to, no matter what that man said to him. He never refused that man the right to come back to work. Which I thought, to me, that told me that he was a very big man. Very big man. But what got me is that I went out with him to search a guy's house.
You have to have a search warrant to do that.
Then you didn't. Then you just had to have a piece of paper and the guy would sign it.
Well, that you could come in.
We could go and search his house, yeah. We went out to this guy's house and search it. And his wife, when she realized what was happening, she started to cry. He had two little kids, and they both started to cry because Mommy was crying. It wasn't very long. Bruce wasn't doing too good either. It's funny now, but then it really...
Had he really been stealing stuff?
Yeah, we took stuff out of his house. I didn't, because when we went back after the first trip, I got somebody to replace me.
Well, wouldn't his wife have known he was stealing?
She didn't know. He had the stuff all out in his garage. But he had stuff that he never could use. Like they used to put a little rubber thing on between the frame and the body. When the body was brought in and it was set down. It was absolutely no earthly use he'd ever have for those. He probably had a peck sack full of them.
What other types of parts do people steal?
Tools, a lot of tools are stolen. Particularly off maintenance. A lot of tools are stolen. GM, air tools are stolen.
How could you get an air tool out?
Stick it underneath your coat in the wintertime.
Well,
Look, when the people are going by you at 3 o'clock at a shift change time, I'm sure you've been in crowds. And you know how difficult it is to check every one of them?
yeah.
You just got a second. And then we still would catch them. We still would catch them. Guys that were much better at it than I were. In fact, most of them were. They'd catch them. I had to do mine the hard way if I caught anybody.
Well, what is the hard way then?
The hard way is going out and finding them. You go out and look. But some of these guys could stand at a gate and they could see a guy walking. They could after a while they could spot him. I never had that. I never had that talent. I wish I did.
Well, now these gates, arm gates where you get in.
That's a joke.
A joke? Why
That's
do you
a
say
joke.
that?
Well, for example, over in Flint, one guy put a chain around one of them, just pulled it right out. Yeah.
Well, what was the purpose of those?
Reduce cost.
What do you mean reduce cost?
Okay, those things cost $50,000 a piece to put in, approximately.
We have a good many there.
Yeah. Yeah. And it costs around that much to keep a patrolman.
I see.
That's what a patrolman will earn.
But I mean, does the gate register each person coming in? Is that...
Well, those gates have the capability. Now, they're not installed, but those gates have the capability that you can stick your card in. It'll record your time and everything.
Oh, I see.
But they haven't put that into effect
Oh.
because of the contract agreement with the union. But those gates do have that capability.
I see.
At least we were told they did. Now, whether they actually do or not, I don't know.
Plant security person.
Well, that relieves the time. A lot of the time, see, a lot of your time is all done by computer now, too.
Oh.
Okay, when you go in, if you punched in when you went through the gate, that would automatically record your time, wouldn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's a very simple thing. It isn't a difficult thing for computer people to program. But stealing, I imagine if General Motors could figure out. Now, back years ago, they used to figure $200 a car for theft. I imagine that probably is somewhere right now, today, between $1,000 and $1,500. Gotta, for the amount of stuff that they're going out there. I think they're losing more. I think they're losing more by taking it out. By taking the officer away from that gate. Mainly, I don't really feel management anymore knows what we're doing, what we did, or what we were capable of. I don't think they have any idea.
Well, a man would lose his job generally if he were caught stealing.
If he were caught stealing, he would generally lose his job for a year. If he had a long term there, pretty decent record.
Like 18, 20 years?
Yeah, 10 years even.
10. Okay.
Or less than that, depending on the situation. They would wait sometimes till contract time. The union put all these in piles, bring these people back, and we'll settle this grievance for that if you bring these people back. We'll push these out of the way and forget about them.
I see.
And they you know, it's the same thing as plea bargaining.
Mm-hmm.
Bring these people back. And the union's right. The union's right. That man has paid those people dues to protect them, regardless of whether you're right or wrong. It's like a lawyer going into court. You're the defendant. He's got to protect you. That's what he's paid for. That's what they're paid for. Same thing. The only trouble is I don't agree with it.
No. Well, how could like a typewriter get away, and big items like that?
Well, there's not that many big typewriters out in the plant.
No, but...
What you're talking about mostly comes out of Building 70. And that has to be taken by a salaried person. That has to be taken by somebody that's been there a while and knows how to do it. And they do it. And they're good at it. We have cameras, but we don't have the manpower to back camera up. They've taken them all away from us. They've sold cameras. And yeah, they've sold cameras to General Motors.
You mean the Oldsmobile has?
Well, the security people.
Yeah.
It's all the way you make a buck.
But who would sell cameras to GM? Is what I mean.
Well, it's the security agencies that deal in security. They sell these cameras,
I see
and
what you're
it's.
saying.
I'm not all in favor of cameras. I don't think that you got to have the people to back the camera up. If the camera's down in Building 70, such as the one you're referring to, the typewriter going out, the VCR system going out. Now they caught the guy with the VCR system. Didn't do anything to him.
Building 70?
Some Building 7. They caught him. Didn't do anything to him. They saw the guy with the camera, with the typewriter, but they couldn't get anybody down there to catch him quick enough. One of the general foremen, for example, stole some flooring, carpeting, and they fired him. That part of the picture has changed somewhat.
They're a little more strict than they were.
Well, yeah, I think they're they're trying to.
Trying to tighten up a bit?
Yeah, they're trying to, but I think they're going about it in the wrong way.
Why do you say that?
I don't think cameras it produce that much for them. People can go out there and produce it, but I don't think cameras do that good a job. I really don't.
Well, aren't they limited in their range?
Yeah, they're limited in their range. They're limited in where you can put them. We've had computers stolen out of Plant 5, and they won't let it. You can only put it in a certain area because of a union contract. What's the use of having it if you're gonna have it?
Well, Bruce, do you remember any, some interesting happenings that you were personally involved in along your career?
Well, I remember the parades they used to have downtown?
Yeah.
When Oldsmobile General Motors would bring those experimental cars in?
Right.
Well, I got assigned to one of those experimental cars.
Oh.
And my job was to stand by them and not let anybody get in them. I didn't do a very good job. I let all the kids sit in the cars. The kids would come up and they had to light up. And I'd get them and they'd sit in the car for a few minutes and work the wheel and they'd get out. And, you know, just bang, bang. That was it. But I felt that was good public relations. I really did.
You worked with a number of public relations people, Jack White.
Yeah.
What did you think of Mr. White?
I liked him. He was all right. I did. I liked him. I didn't know him only to work for him, and he was easy to work for me to work for. He was. There was a young couple. I don't remember his name. He was in public relations, and when they had one of the open houses, he took pictures at Building 68. Very nice people. His wife worked for Oldsmobile, and they both left and formed their own company. Real, just super people. I can't remember their names. I can't remember their
Jerry
names.
O'Neill?
Gee, I wish I could remember his name.
Okay, well. Bob Woolhouse,
Mm-hmm.
the PR photographer.
Yeah, I still see him once in a while.
Oh, do you?
Yeah, he doesn't acknowledge that he remembers me. And I thought, well, if you don't want to, that's your problem. I'll tell you, he saved my bacon once.
How did that happen?
Well, it was after a party, and I don't even remember if it was a football party or a quarter century party or what party it was. And we were at another party, and we were getting pretty well into the sauce. And it was funny about Plant Security people. They stuck together. If they went to a party, they stuck together. They didn't mingle with the other people. Sometimes, you can't.
No.
And we were just, it was mostly that. And Bob was there.
Was he taking pictures? Or
No.
his job, or
No, he wasn't taking pictures. He took some pictures of us. See, Oldsmobile used to have a pistol team.
Oh.
And I was always the last man on the pistol team because I never was good enough to be anything else. Boy, I used to try awful hard.
When was this pistol team in existence?
50s and 60s.
50s and 60s?
Yeah.
What would you do? Go out on some range?
We used the Lansing Police Department's pistol range to practice.
Where is that?
Well, it used to be out on Willow when we practiced out there. It's been torn down in someplace else now, where I don't know where it is.
Okay.
But we used to go out there. General Motors used to buy our ammunition.
Oh.
All of our ammunition.
And you had to buy your own pistol?
We had to buy our own guns, but they bought our own ammunition.
Oh.
They'd buy it by the case, and we'd shoot it up by the case. Yeah.
Was that under the auspices of the Recreation Department, or?
No, that was under the auspices of Mahoney and Cutler.
Mahoney and Cutler?
Yeah.
Okay.
Cutler was a gruff old boy. Mahoney, I got along real good with Mahoney. I got along better with Mahoney than I did Cutler. And
Why do you say that?
I don't know. I just
Any special incidents with Mr.
no, never, not neither one. They were both nice people as far as I was concerned. Come on, they were at a heck of a different level than I was. But any time I ever had any deal, I had to call. When as I say, any time I had a dealing with them, we had one of the unions that we weren't really affiliated, not affiliated with, but that we weren't really in contact with, had a strike at the on South Logan Street. No, Logan Street, Cedar Street, where that hotel is out there. What they call it? Clarion. Yeah, it's a Clarion. It used to be a Clarion. And there was a Oldsmobile display going on out there, and these guys pulled a strike. And I was working the desk. And anytime you get something like that, where our people and General Motors are going to get involved, we called the personnel director. And you took your orders directly from him. And there again, it was never any problem. When that happened,
What was the incident out there?
they had a strike, and they were pulling it right in front of our people, right in front of our display.
Oh,
Where,
letting people up?
yeah, we had a party going on there of some sort. I forgot what it was. And those guys down there said, "Hey, we got a strike going here, and they're going to block cars." Well, a lot of the UAW people wouldn't cross a picket line. A lot of them would. But they wanted to avoid an incident. So these guys called and said, "This is what we got." And I couldn't find the sergeant at that time, for nothing. He didn't answer the radio, which we had spots in the plant there were bare spots in the plant where you couldn't get any reception at all. And so I ended up calling Cutler, Harold Cutler, and he was out on the golf course, and he was not pleased to be called. And on top of that, his wife was on the telephone, and I had to break the connection. I called the operator and requested that they break the connection. I had an emergency, and I wanted to talk to Mr. Cutler and told her who I was, what my name was, a whole bit. That's what you had to do. And wasn't long, he came on the phone. And there again, he said, "What do you got, Bruce?" But I could tell he was a little bit upset, and I told him what had happened. And he said, "Okay." And he said, "You get old Sam Donahue right away." I said, "Okay. Tell him what it is, and tell him I said take care of it." I said, "Okay." I got a hold of Sam. And there again, Sam was, you couldn't ask for a nicer guy. I like Sam. When Cutler left, I had seriously hoped that he would get the job. Sam was good at what he did. He was a good BSer. Call it what you want, but he was good at it. And I always got along good with him. And
well, what would Donahue do when he got out there?
Well, he took my message and he says, "I'll check into it." It wasn't, probably about 45 minutes later, he called me, and he asked me to call somebody else and get them over there.
Would that be another Plant
Yeah,
Security?
no, that was somebody else from personnel.
Oh, I see.
And so I got a hold of them, and they went out there, and there was a little incident problem involving our people and the union, and they got it resolved. They got it quieted down. But those are just everyday things. Now, to somebody on the outside, that's something of major importance. Like I was following a tour one time, and this woman was pregnant.
Oh, was this a walking tour?
Yeah. And one of the people that was the head of the tours.
Monty Childs?
Not Monty Childs, it was the other guy, his partner.
George Egbert?
Yeah, George Egbert, yeah. He was a nice guy, very nice person. And, well, so was Monty Childs. Keep him out of the sauce. Don't tell anybody I said that. But anyway, George told me, he said, Bruce, it's for some reason, when you get down here where they have the body drop, you get over reasonably close to that pregnant woman. I said, what? He said, there's something about that body drop that causes them to have a problem. And he said, I really don't want to bring them down here. But he said, there's too many and I can't do anything about it. Okay. So when we got down to the body drop, I watched her, and I was about 3 feet from her, and that body started to come down, and she started to go down, just like that. And I'm not going to tell you what went through my mind, but I thought, oh, I don't need this. I don't need this. And believe it or not, General Motors thought so much of the way we did things that we had been out to see a movie with this lieutenant. He was a lieutenant then, Shaw. So we could learn how to deliver a baby, and that's the truth.
Is that right?
I swear to God that's the truth. Because the guy sitting right beside me couldn't stand it, and he shut his eyes. And old Duke nailed him. Duke nailed him. And I thought, boy, I don't care whatever happens. I'm never going to shut my eyes. That guy's around. But
Did she faint?
She fainted. I went over to first aid. Got a stretcher, took her over to first aid, got the nurse, got her quieted down. She went into labor, what we thought was labor. And they got the plant doctor down there. I don't even remember the nurse's name was on. Yeah, Helen. I think the nurse's name was Helen.
Who was the doctor?
No, that wasn't her name. I don't remember, because I stayed outside the door, naturally.
Sure.
And, in fact, to tell you the truth, I was calming her husband down. And, you know, in the first aid, you have that little waiting room outside of the first aid. That's where I put him, because I didn't want him in there, where he would be right next door to the door where she was in.
Yeah.
So they called for the ambulance, and the ambulance came down and got her, and we took her to the hospital. And I said, well, now, where is your car at? And he told me, and I said, okay, I'm going to get somebody to come and get you, take you to your car. You're new here. You're a tourist. Yeah. I said, I'll get somebody to come and get you. Take you to your car. We'll take you to the hospital. We'll lead you. We'll show you right where the hospital is. Okay? And we did that. And it was about, 8-10 weeks later, the guy wrote a letter to General Motors. And he thanked us for it, which I thought was nice.
Did she have the baby?
No, it was she had false labor. Yeah, she had false labor.
Oh,
Right, I you know, those kind of things make it good about your job.
Yes.
And the fact that you could do those things, you had the power to do it.
Well, and a lot of decisions you had to make right on the spot on your own.
Oh yeah. And as I say, I never had any problem with being backed up. Never. I had a woman come to Elm Street gate right off the street. Right, and she was down at the foot of Elms and Townsend. Her car stopped. She couldn't get going. And she come up to the gate. She was big as a barrel. And she said, my pains are 3 minutes apart. And she said, I've got to get to the hospital. What did you do? Stopped the very first car coming out, which happened to be a guy by the name of the superintendent named Armitage.
Oh, yeah.
Chuck Armitage. I stopped him and I said, Chuck, this lady has to go to the hospital. Her pains are 3 minutes apart. Would you take her, please? No question. No question. Put her right in the front seat of the car, and on her way to the hospital she went. Really, that happened.
Isn't that something?
That's it, but that's the kind of people you had. That's the kind of people you had. Yeah.
Well, you've had a very exciting life.
It's been good. It's good, all but I'd say the last 6 years have not been good. As I say, they got a different breed of people in there.
Did you take an early out?
No, I worked till 65. A year ago in April, my wife had a very severe stroke. She had a stroke 2 years prior to that, but it was not severe. She had very little after effects. She was not a candidate then, and she wasn't a candidate for this one, and they don't know why. But the fact is she'd had 2 strokes, and they kind of figured that there was a possibility she might have another one. The stroke affected her. I got a 32-foot cabin cruiser, and we were going to spend most of our summers on that on the Great Lakes. Because I've been boating since the early 70s, and I like it. We had a cottage before that. And with your kids growing up, as they grow up, particularly in the teenage years, they want their friends to come to the cottage. They don't want little brother and sister along, because that cramps their style. But in our case, well, we would go up there during the week, and sometimes my wife would stay up there. But then, when they got in a position where things were getting, finances were not good, I sold the cottage, and I used that money to put them through college. And of course, by that time, they were in school and pretty secure. So my wife went to work for Sparrow Hospital. She was the chief clerk over there in insurance. But when we had 2 of them in college at once, and
Pretty heavy responsibility.
Financial-wise, it was an awful drain on us. And we were right down to where we felt that the best thing we could do was remortgage the house. Because otherwise, the third one wasn't going to make it. And she was working. She worked there 24 and a half years before she had the stroke. And of course, now she's on disability. But we got them through. We got 2 of them through. The third one, he said, yeah. He said, Dad, if you send me to college, if you want me to go to college, I'll go. But I don't want to go. I do not like school. I've never liked school. It was not a struggle for me to get through school. I just didn't like it.
What does he want to do?
He wanted to do nothing. He wanted to go play. Which...
You gotta have money to do this.
Well, that's what I told him. So, he worked here for General Motors. Of course, when he got out of high school, the Army grabbed him right then, because that was right in the middle of the Vietnamese War. And I told him, I said, you're on your way. Plan on it. And that was the hardest thing I ever did, was put him on that plane. God, I didn't want him to go through what I went through, I'll tell you. I really didn't. I was really upset. I came home and bawled. Still bothers me. But when he graduated from boot camp, we used to call it boot camp, and the Army calls it basic training, and we went down to North Carolina to the fort when he graduated, and I watched those kids. So I went into the first sergeant's office to see where he was at. They sent a runner up to get him. All right, standing there beside the car, and here comes this kid of mine across the drill field, shoes in one hand, hat in the other, with his brass, and his socks. And I looked up and I thought, I can't believe they would let him out of the barracks like that. And across the parade ground came the drill sergeant. I told my wife, I said, get in the car. Forget it, just get in the car. She said, why? I said, he's never going to make it here. I said, that DI is going to stop him? And I said, there's no way. No way. Well, he only stopped about 50 feet from us. And by that time, I got my wife in the car. And she was upset as all get out, and her mouth was going, and I said, just shut up, please. And she said, what are you going to do? I said, nothing I can do. I'm going home. I said, I'm going to stay here and listen to that. Next thing I knew, the kid was standing beside me. I looked at him. I said, how'd you get out of that? Problem. I turned around and I looked at the sergeant. I said, Sergeant? The guy by his flat hat. I knew he was a DI. Are you his DI? I said, yeah. He said, and he was a black guy. I said, Sergeant, what do you think of this? And he said, sir, it's the new Army. And then I, being an old boatswain mate from the Navy, I said some unkind things to the sergeant. The sergeant just stood there. And he was kind of smiling. I said, this is a disgrace. I said, you didn't teach him how to be a soldier. You babysat him. And I said, I don't like it. And I said, I don't know who the captain is or who the company commander is. But I said, I'm sure as hell not going to ever sit still for this kind of stuff. I said, he don't even know what to do. I said, he can't even put a uniform on. He just looked at me and said, it's the new Army. So I talked to the captain, and he said, well, they send them on to advanced infantry training from here. I said, I'm going to be down here. I said, I will be down here. Plan on it. I said, I took one walk through hell, and I said, I'm not going to make damn sure my kid don't. Not with all, not unless. And I said, that was early in World War II. We had nothing. I said, you're not going to do that to mine. No way am I going to allow that. He got sent to truck driving school and stayed 2 years as a truck driver.
Does he like it?
When he was in the Army. So he came out, and he went to work for, then it was C&J, driving a truck. And he makes more money than my two daughters do with college degrees.
But he must like it.
He must like it, yeah. He don't want to do nothing else.
Well, if you're happy.
He's smart. Smart enough to go through college. He builds cars for hobby.
You mean drivable cars?
Drivable cars. When his son was coming up, he built hot rods with him. He built, cut down trucks, built trucks up, changed engines, took a wrecked Corvette rather. There was, I didn't think there was, you know, Corvette's a fiberglass body. Totally ruined. Steering wheel was even broken. He restored the whole thing, from one end to the other. And he paid, I think, $3,000 for it. And he sold it for 20-something.
He's doing what he wants to.
Yeah, he's doing what he wants to do. Yeah. Yeah.
Bruce, what do you think? Have we covered everything?
Got everything.
Like to share?
I just looked at my watch a few minutes ago. I didn't realize I'd been run off the mouth that long.
No, this has been a very interesting interview, and I appreciate your signing our interview agreement, and I appreciate your spending time with us. Have you any, you mentioned you had the one artifact of the badge.
If I can find it, yeah.
Okay.
I'll certainly bring it in.
Okay, do you have any photographs or any other memorabilia that we could have copied and add to our collection here at the Oldsmobile History Center? Any old team magazines or internal publications? Just anything that you feel might be nice for a library we're attempting to add to our collection.
No, I don't. the badge is something I'm going to have to look for. I think I know where it's at.
Find it.
But I do know somebody, we used to call him JJ, and that last name was Hatch. And he's out in Nevada. He retired out in Nevada. There was a guy that collected everything.
J.J. Hatch?
Yep. He collected everything.
Okay.
And he was one of the desk people for a long time. Real good desk guy. Nice person.
Okay.
If you dropped him a line, if you can find his address. If you can't, you tell me and I'll get it.
I think maybe we can. We'll check that out.
If anybody would have, he was a collector of everything. He used to go to auctions and find these rings.
Oh yes.
You know, and I always wanted to get mine updated, but I never did.
Very nice looking
It
ring.
is. They were nice looking. I was really upset when they discontinued it.
Yeah, it's kind of too bad.
Yeah.
Because it's,
You can't find them.
no.
But JJ used to go to garage sales. He'd find them. He'd buy them for $35, $40.
I've heard other people say
Yeah.
that you can do that once in a while too.
Why would somebody give up? Now, of course, this to me is it's mine, yeah, but it's also like my son said. Dad, he said, that's a family heirloom now.
I'm going to shut this off now.
Yeah.
I think we've covered
Yeah.
our interview, and I really appreciate the time that
Well, I'm glad to do it.